For those that don't know, Fool Nelson and MB are actually at the trial this week. So we get to hear from them today. I know they had a lot of really interesting observations they were kind of sharing in some posts today, and hopefully they're going to give us the play-by-play of exactly what happened in the courtroom. So I'll probably turn it right over to you guys if you guys kind of want to tell us your observations from today, and I see we have a lot of other great accounts here, so I'll add those guys as a speaker if you guys want to take it away.
Yeah, and take it away.
Come on,
it's your phone.
Yeah. All right, I'll kick it off. Just a quick overview. The day started pretty, I wouldn't say boring, but turn the thing on. It wasn't too exciting. It was kind of boilerplate stuff and what we'd expect. Charles Dolan was the first witness, and I'd say that he didn't.
I'm just going to throw this over here.
Seriously.
All right, I'm not even going to be a host. I'm just going to be a listener.
Sorry, everyone. So there were, anyway, Dolan came up and said, hold on one sec. Sorry, guys.
It's good so far, MB.
Yeah, it's going great.
Okay, so where were we?
Dolan.
Oh, yeah, so Dolan came up. Did you say anything about his, testimony?
No, just...
So anyways, he literally hasn't said anything, dude.
Okay, so...
he had a beard.
Yeah, so sweet. Just to start off the trial, just to set the mood. So me and MB get there pretty early, and then, we're out in, the hall, waiting to, see... just to go into the courtroom or whatever. And the thing says locked. And I'm like, okay, can we go in? And then we turn around, I turn around and ask this dude, and I'm like, can we just go in or whatever? And he's just like, you should, this guy will know better. And he points at this other guy, and he's like, yeah, you can go in, whatever. And I looked at him again. I'm like, that's Dolan with a fucking beard. And if I would have been thinking more, I would have asked him some more questions that I had, but I'm like, I think that's Dolan. But so we go in, then Dolan takes the stand, and, he just goes into his background or whatever. And let me see what my notes actually say. He goes into his background, whatever, that he worked for Ketchum. He was lobbying and doing PR work for Russia or whatever. Overall, Dolan was kind of boring, in my opinion. They get to just the main thing that was cool about the Dolan part is when they get to his conversations with his email to Iggy about he had this GOP source that was telling him that Corey Lewandowski or whatever was pissed at Manafort and they're glad he was out of the campaign or whatever to the effect was. And then Durham, when he interviewed Dolan, he had him compare the dossier report to his own email, and he's like, side by side, you think that came from you? And he was like, yeah, that came from me. And then the defense came basically and was like, so did the special counsel pressure you to say that report came from you? Because that's one of the counts of lying, I think, or whatever. And he was basically just pushed back. And he's like, no, I just looked at them and they're pretty much the same thing. That report came from me. So it kind of definitely buried the defense there, in my opinion, because he definitely didn't go with the defense, or that Durham was pressuring him to say that report came from him. That was my main takeaway from Dolan. Besides, that part wasn't very interesting. MB, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that they really were banking on that he was not going to be a very cooperative witness, and he ended up being pretty cooperative. He was jovial and just kind of going along, I got no skin in this game, and they tried to make it out that do you know that you might have been a target for this? And he's like, my lawyer looks at that stuff. I don't even know exactly what that means, but I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not worried. And that, I think, made him pretty credible. And he was a Democratic operative. They went through that whole history, so he didn't have any reason to to lie for the prosecution or even bend their way. It just pretty much confirmed everything that the prosecution wanted him to confirm.
Yeah, and just watching him, I kind of liked the dude, to be honest. He seemed like he had a good sense of humor. He definitely wasn't they're trying to get like they're always asking him like, hey, did you know like Igor was like making these reports? And he's like, I honestly wasn't thinking about the politics of it or anything like that. And I believe what he was saying and stuff. And they asked him like, so what did you think? Where's your opinion about like Donald Trump? And he was just like, I would say negative. But like, I mean, it was kind of funny, but it's like that's true. And
Yeah.
there wasn't really much to gain from the Dolan thing. Like the defense didn't catch a win there, in my opinion. What do you think, MB?
Yeah, I agree. I think that like the morning was pretty boring, and then when Kevin Helson came up as the next witness, that was like that again. Just to give a quick overview, because I think like if you want to get to the meaty bits real quick, he was, in my opinion, he was really boring and direct. It didn't seem like, all right, this guy's just everybody's singing from the same hymnal or saying the same things, and then in cross-examination, he just absolutely blew up and just was saying everything the defense wanted him to say, it seemed like. And then the redirect was just absolutely crazy. Like he went from being Durham's witness to Durham just attacking him and his credibility and his like everything he'd done to support Igor as his confidential human source. So we can go into those details because it was really fire. It was nuts.
Yeah, that'd be great, guys. I know you had some posts today, and it sounds like Durham had a monster, and then he became a monster. What's the deal with that?
Well, I mean, like, so if you haven't seen Durham in the courtroom, which I hadn't before, which so like in his direct or whatever it's called, he's very even his like mannerisms throughout the entire process, like his interactions, you just like walking when he's interacting with the lawyers, with the defense lawyers and stuff like that. You can just tell he's like a really nice guy, like jovial, just like joking the entire time. And with it on him going in its direct against Helson, he was very like first of all, just to compare him to Mueller, Durham is on point. He does not stop, and he is sharp. Like he does not stop talking. There's no lapses. Like if you watch Joe Biden, there's no lapses in his. I mean, even me, like when I fucking talk, Durham is way better at talking and than me, easily. And but when in his direct against Helson, he's very kind and I mean when he's just like here's the question, it's like okay, this goes on to the next thing. Just very generous with him. I mean, because it was his witness. And so, I mean, when we left for lunch, me and MB are like, yeah, Durham didn't really have much energy there, but we'll see what happens. And then, I don't know, MB, maybe you should cover the defense. Like, that was my, like, initial point, but I'm like, yeah, he's just, like, for me, like, now, like, looking back at it, he was lulling Helson, like, I don't know if that's what he was actually doing, but he was, like, it seemed to me, like, in hindsight that he was like lulling Helson into a false sense of security. I don't know if that's what he was actually doing, but that's what it turned out to be.
The only time that in direct that Durham really had any energy was anytime Crossfire Hurricane came up, he would take a shot at them. Like he would say, so is this something Crossfire Hurricane should have done if they were doing their job? Not in those exact words, but something very like that. So he was sort of setting it up as, Crossfire Hurricane is a mess. We can't talk too much about it because it's not all that involved, but obviously it's bad. And you got the impression that like, oh, well, the counterintelligence division maybe outside of Crossfire Hurricane is, they're professionals. This guy seems pretty straight. None of the questions were too difficult. He seemed to be very professional. So then cross-examination comes on and he just goes into the tank for like, you immediately got the sense that he really had a lot of compassion and a lot of sympathy for Danchenko, that he liked working with this guy. And the questions he's getting asked are like, did he ever, and can you think of any time that he said something that didn't prove out or that misled you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, nothing like that. No. He'd always do whatever was asked of him. He'd always, anytime we'd ask him a question, he did it. Anytime we had a request, he would carry through. And it was starting to feel like, oh man, this is not good for the prosecution because this guy's, making Danchenko look good. Well, it just built from there.
Yeah.
Like Next
Well,
thing
he
you know,
kept coming back like to like this Sergey Million call. Like that's the big thing about the Helson thing, and he's just like, yeah, like we'd always come back to the Sergey Million call, and he's like, yeah, but he basically said he believed him that that's what Iggy thought. Like, and then he would put it in these reports. Like he'd always file these like his source reports, and like the only like contradictory thing was that this Sergey Million call where he can't like prove this happened, and Iggy has never corroborated. He never has shown him any evidence that this call took place. But besides that, he thinks he's been truthful, and he thinks he's even been truthful about the million call. And then it starts getting into post Crossfire Hurricane, I would say.
yeah, that it's we found it interesting that that he was handed off to Helson, that Danchenko was handed out to Helson, who was not read into our Crossfire Hurricane. And that was always, that was, we were looking at each other like, why is that happening? Maybe that's some kind of policy or something. But they specifically asked Helson, the defense did, so you were offered to join Crossfire Hurricane and you were smart enough to say no. And the whole courtroom started laughing. The gallery just started laughing, which is, all these reporters that they are following this, they knew that was funny, which I'm like, all right, everyone knows Crossfire Hurricane was a shit show. So that's good, at least. But he had the opportunity to join Crossfire, and he declined, apparently. So that was one interesting factor. But so he's running his own show with this, and the Crossfire guys would ask questions through Helson. So if they wanted to know something that they're trying to still nail down these details, like the million call and all these things, they'd go and they'd tell Helson, ask him this. Helson would ask, and it was like a telephone game. And it's like, this is totally not a good way to like get the answers.
Yeah, so like Helson was basically saying like he wasn't sure if he even reviewed like the 3-day interview. He would just basically be like, his priority was definitely the dossier, but he was like, I was tasked basically by Brian Auden. And so anything they wanted, I would just ask them and to follow up. And like the million call was like one of his main things, which like that was like covered a lot. But he basically said at some point, Crossfire Hurricane just basically disappeared. And they stopped even asking about that. And he just went into these other investigations that he was using Iggy for. And it turned out that he was like used in like 25 active investigations, and this is when like the supreme like Iggy's defense lawyer definitely put on this act where he was just like Iggy's like a super patriot, like he was helping in all these investigations and stuff. Like, I mean, what you might have, we don't know anything about these investigations, but in the back of our heads we're like, are these just 25 other fucking Crossfire Hurricanes?
Exactly.
And that's what MB said. I'm like, I know that's exactly what I was thinking. And I don't know, describe like what happened, like what it built into.
So the defense starts like going rapid fire, which this is all right. Here's where I think the cases, that these cases might be lost, because the defense starts asking Helson questions about that are very specific to like the defense's theory on this thing, like did I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of exactly how he put it, but he would say like, so when Danchenko was contacted by someone purporting to be Sergey Millian, or an anonymous caller that he assumed was Sergey Millian on an app, was that something you think happened? And he'd just be like, yes. Like, wait a minute. No one said there was an app. That's not in evidence. That's not anything. This is the defense lawyer putting that in the jury's head, and you're just like rolling with it.
Yeah, but like before, like they were like it was like a little bit more nuanced. It was like, technically, if somebody has your phone number, can you use an app and then call them on that app? And he was like, yeah, that's possible. Like, because we know how like those apps work. And then it went into that, which I didn't actually pick up on, but MB saw that. At some point, I was falling asleep, but it wasn't during this part. So, so MB saw that, and then the questioning about Dolan.
What do
you have the better notes about that?
Yeah. So this one I think was the killer for that charge, because he kind of went through all right. So Danchenko said that he talked to Dolan about the Steele dossier, and that wouldn't include electronic communications, whatever. And then he just rephrased the question and said, so if he had only talked to him, then what literally he said was true. And he replied, yes, that's correct. Like he just destroyed that entire charge, I think, because the guy that he lied to said, no, it's not a lie. It was literally true. If, going by his, by his point of view or his argument, then yeah, that's 100% true. So I think they're going to be in big trouble on that one. So like it goes into this sort of rapid fire questioning thing that all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is swinging really bad. He's like pro Danchenko at this point. Just going along with whatever the defense is saying, just kind of like, yes, 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 yes. So then the defense starts to go into all the things that Danchenko.
MB leadership. Let me jump in here just a second.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that was possible is because Durham had to call Helson as his witness, which means the defense then got Helson on cross, which allowed them to lead with every question. And in every question, they could suggest the answer they wanted. And that's how they got those yes, 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 yes answers.
Yeah, of course. It was good lawyering for sure.
That's exactly how it felt. And I don't know if the jury necessarily picked up on it, but they were pretty attentive. And that to me was just one of those moments where if I was in that jury, I'd be like, wow, he just said the opposite of what the prosecution has been telling us this whole time. So at this point, the defense just starts really lauding everything that Danchenko accomplished with the FBI and asking all these questions about, all right, so you put in showing documents, you put in a request to pay him $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. I think the total came out to was like
560.
Yeah, he got paid a lot of money. And then they're like, okay, why is he getting this money? And he starts talking about all these investigations that he'd led and what were they called? Internal intelligence reports.
Yeah, it's like intelligent IRRs, and he like contributed to like I forget how many of these IRR things, intelligence report, blah blah blah. And they're like, oh yeah, like these things are like super cool because for them to actually be an IRR, there has to be corroboration and all this other crap. And I'm like, oh, what did they just use like news articles again to corroborate it or whatever? But go on from there. I guess.
Yeah. So, and one of the things was, well, before Danchenko started with us, we had 0 espionage cases opened against Russia, and by the time he left, there were 2,000. That was literally like not necessarily all attributed to him, but they were building this up as he was the keystone. He was the what they built this entire.
They literally said that the defense was like, you told me that he literally like reshaped how the FBI perceives like malign intelligence, like investigations and shit like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, yes, this is true. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. He's this absolute hero. And, and we're just looking at each other like, this is the guy that just admitted to writing 80% of the Steele dossier, and they're running with this thing. It's not. So
they increased their like espionage workload by an undefined amount from 0 to 2,000.
Yeah, based on the guy that invented the Steele dossier, like that is just stunning. Like this guy went from wow, he seems pretty reasonable to how is this guy in the intelligence business? How is this guy even employed? Like that is just absolutely wild.
Yes. So then they went on to like being like, all right, so he contributed to like 25 investigations and 25 are active now or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then they I feel like the finale of the defense was like, then they're like, then they start coming after like, and then like Attorney General Barr approved of the release of this redacted electronic communication. And Helson was very against the release of it. And which probably for him, he's like, oh yeah, I'm definitely against that. But he was one pushing back against Barr to release this to Senate Judiciary, and Barr eventually released it, and he was pissed off about that. And then Sears was basically just like, and then this redacted report was released immediately by the Senate Judiciary Committee by like a congressman that we won't name, Lindsey Graham, and then like a couple of days later, internet detectives figured out who it was, and then the New York Times released his name, and that's when Igor Danchenko was closed as a as a source for the FBI because his name was brought out and his
Cover.
that's basic. Yes, cover was blown at that point.
Yeah, and then all the disasters ensued, and they're worried about his life, and also I think the cream on the top of this thing, the whipped cream was what they say.
It's like with the Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war now. Have people been coming to you asking if they can use Igor Danchenko? And he's like, yes, that's been happening in the last month.
Yeah, so
to gather intelligence. And at this point, Iggy's wife flees the room crying.
Tears. Yeah.
And Adam Goldman sprints out of the room too.
Yeah. So Adam Goldman, New York Times. Okay, my story done. This is.
But also but they blamed Adam basically for it. So I'm like, okay. Well, us and Adam basically, and then but Adam ran out, and we were like, well, I mean, like this is like I was watching him like, oh yeah, that was like a good defense right there.
So it's getting late as well. By the way, it's like after 5, they were going to 6, and everyone's like, all right, this is winding down. It was not. It was not winding down. Yes. This is when things absolutely got lit.
Yeah.
Hey, MB.
So, what's that?
MB, I just want to jump in. Didn't you message me earlier that once Igor Danchenko was outed by us, Helson actually approved like a huge like compensation package for him or something like that?
Yeah, go into that.
Yeah, I think. Well, he applied for it was over $300,000. I think it got declined, but he wanted over $300,000 as like a golden parachute for this for Danchenko, and the grand total came to I think it was like
565.
Yeah, it was some crazy amount of money. So he was really upset. You could tell he was like he's very emotionally attached to Danchenko, and you could just tell in his mannerisms and the way he's making these statements, and he's really upset about it, and so
let me jump in here just a second. And this is Ship. I can tell you 100%. Helson didn't work on anything else for the entire time Iggy was his CHS. He probably had daily contact, and they, if they had as much activity behind, whatever information he could generate, as was described in court, this was a full-time job, and Helson didn't do anything else. So that attachment to his source, this is something that FBI agents have to always be very careful about. Becoming attached to sources is a minefield, and you could see how it played out today because Helson couldn't be detached. He didn't maintain that professional space. Right.
But at the same time, Ship, like he was like, for me, like I didn't sense any lying or anything. It felt like he believed it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's about to get.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
He is.
I just wanted to make that clear for the audience that he 100% believed what he was saying.
Yeah. And it's about to get much worse because so during the all of this burnishing the reputation of Igor Danchenko, which seemed like, we were just talking about it seemed very like smooth and like almost, I'm not saying that they rehearsed together, but this thing went just off without a hitch. And we're like, are they trying to win the case?
He must have told his defense lawyers like, hey, we're buddies. Like, like we had a great relationship.
It seemed like they were really trying to get his reputation back and not just, necessarily win the case. But somehow during all this, all right, this takes us back to something Durham was trying to get in and wasn't allowed to, the 2009 investigation of Danchenko as a espionage target, as a Russian agent, that originally in the what's it called, limine, the judge was not going to let this in because it was just too defamatory and it was just going to make him look bad without necessarily having anything to do with the case. Well, the defense managed to open that door wide open because as soon as the defense finished, Durham jumped up into redirect, and this just went straight into the 2009 thing. They immediately had a sidebar, and
Well, so we were just sitting there like, okay, what's going to happen? Then Durham immediately goes, all right, you said all this, but what about derogatory information about Iggy? And Helson was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, did you include when you wrote like the opening thing of Igor Danchenko as a CHS, like what derogatory information did you include? Did you know of any? He's like, I didn't. include any. And he goes, what about the CI investigation? And the media is like, bam, like immediately, like they go to whatever they call it, the sidebar sealed thing. And like they go, like if you haven't been in the courtroom, which I hadn't been before, immediately, like they all go like huddle on the side and like white noise starts playing in the court. So we can't hear what they're talking about. So me and like MB are like, oh, they just might have opened that door.
Something just happened. They talked for like 10 minutes. It was not like a quick thing. And they came back out and Durham just asked the same question he just asked. They're like, you won that.
The thing is, like, I was talking about it earlier, like Durham before was very jovial and kind and sort of soft spoken almost. And when he came back, he fucking hopped on him. Like I was like, holy shit. Like he was just like, what about derogatory information? And Helson was like, what? And then he's just like, did you include the counterintelligence investigation in the thing? And he's like, no, I didn't. I did not include that CI investigation. And he's like, why not? That's derogatory information. And he's like, I didn't know about it.
Right. When he made the initial application for the CHS status, but he found out about it shortly after because Brian Auten, not immediately, not in the first, Auten, they tried to bring him in January, right after that first meeting in 2017. And they kind of floated this whole thing. And then by March, they did it. So Auten didn't tell him that about this until at some point after he became a CHS.
Yep.
And another little tidbit we learned from Durham today was that Auten was working on the CI 2009 until Auten was there too. Mr. Wurzwalder, he's been with this Danchenko thing literally since 2009. He knows everything about this guy. Like he knows more than anyone in the world about Igor Danchenko. It's insane. And
hey, here's Ship again. I know for a fact. I can't say why. I know for a fact Auten has been in the Russian section of counterintelligence going back to 2007. That's where he started. That makes him the FBI's senior most Russian analyst. He is the FBI's in-house expert on Russian intelligence operations. That's not disputable. I mean, he's got 15 years worth of experience on one subject. I mean, that's the way analysts work. They don't move around like agents do. They don't change, offices and start doing different kinds of violations and accumulate different, spheres of experience. They tend to specialize in one thing, especially at headquarters. And that's where Auten's always been. So it doesn't surprise me at all that that's why he touches Hunter Biden's laptop, that he touches Iggy back in 2009. He's involved in Crossfire Hurricane because Russia is what he does.
Yeah, and that's frightening as much of a knucklehead as he seems to be. And it's also frightening that Helson seems like the same mold after we kind of get into this when the pressure gets on this guy and Durham just starts. So that was the first thing is he never revised his initial application, which apparently is just something that he could have done. He never did really apparently anything upon finding this information that this existed. He just kind of kept the boat,
Well, what he said was he went and Auten told him about it. So then he went and talked to the case agent that was running the counterintelligence investigation on Iggy, who was like Laura Pino out of Baltimore. And what did he learned some stuff from there and then is that when he went to the human?
No, we don't know. But his conclusion from talking to the Baltimore people was that this was hearsay and there was no there. He concluded for himself that this wasn't important and it was probably filed the wrong way under the wrong, investigative title or whatever. But the Baltimore people don't feel that way. And Durham's questions are pretty pointed that no, and they couldn't talk about it was a hearsay problem with exactly why the investigation was started. But we know that Danchenko had cozied up to someone and offered hey, if you can get me some secret information, I can get you some money or something like that. So
there's one witness who was basically just no, we had firsthand information that Iggy was seeking basically information to bring back to Russia or whatever. He was seeking whatever was in that report. That he was seeking information about like a sub or whatever it was, and they had information that that person existed. But there was some like talk about like why was it open as like a 65 or 95A investigation compared to something else, which like was in the weeds, which we didn't really understand. But then this.
Okay, hold on. I think if my recollection is correct, 65A is an espionage code for the FBI. My recollection of the basic outline of that is he was I don't think he was, I mean, this was like 2009, right after the Obama administration came in. He got to know a couple of young aides who were expected to go into the White House and work on either the National Security Division side, National Security Council. And he said to the aides, if you come across or have access to classified information, I know some people who would pay you for it. And then that linked back to a contact that they had already established that he had with at least one suspected Russian intelligence officer. And somewhere they had information that he had at some point in the past expressed an interest to become part of the Russian diplomatic service.
Yeah, and then become a Russian intelligence officer from there.
Right. Yeah. So that's what prompted the 65A investigation to be opened of him. The idea that maybe not that he was an intelligence officer, but that he might be an asset for Russian intelligence, a go-between.
Right.
And that's what the investigation was supposed to chase down. And then, it was closed when, the report is that they thought he had left the country when his visa expired and he didn't renew it.
Right. And that was something Durham started hitting him on. He really worked his way through saying, all right, well, did you read the report? And he said, no, I didn't have access to it. Well, did you ask for access to it? Well, I couldn't have got it. And he's like, well, I don't believe that's true. However he kind of phrased it, that put some doubt on that. And just sort of working through, did you find out the case was closed? Why did you think it was? Did you realize that he'd overstayed his visa illegally? And that was a derogatory issue.
He said basically, like, was he committing, like, could have been committing fraud on this visa. He didn't leave the country, blah, blah, blah. And he kept on being like, well, I couldn't have access to this report because only the intelligence people could have access to it, blah, blah, blah.
So they beat him up on that for quite a while and made him look pretty like, all right, this guy's definitely not doing due diligence and is looking a little shaky. So then they bring up this FBI validation unit that, okay, we don't know. We're not in agreement if he went to this right after going through the.
I'm talking to Pino or what?
Right. We don't know if that happened immediately or if it happened sometime later, but apparently this went to an FBI validation unit that's supposed to look at the Danchenko situation and make some recommendations whether this guy is, on the up and up. Are there any issues with him? Are we too close to this that somebody from an independent party can look at it and go, you know what? Here's some.
It's called like the human validation section or something like that.
It's the enhanced source validation unit. And if you recall, that was what was suggested to be done with Steele.
Yep.
And Priestap.
Yeah, Bianco wanted it, I think.
It was the exact same thing that they were going to do with Steele, and was it Priestap or McCabe? One of the two blocked it, and that was what led the agent. That's what led the supervisor. Pienka to resign and ask off. Because he wanted the enhanced source validation unit to look at Steele. So it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as soon as that came up, another sidebar. So it was like, oh, you hit another nerve here. So again, like he started, whatever the question was, he came back after, this was a quicker sidebar and asked the same question. So Durham won that one again. And he started just going through all the recommendations that this, enhanced source validation unit made that Helson just either ignored, said no to, or in some cases it seemed like, well, I went along with it in not in spirit, but in.
Yeah, it was basically like, okay, so like, were you suggested to do an assessment of who are his allegiance to? Like, what were his motives? Like, were you told to do that?" And he was just like, "Yes." And he's like, "Did you do it?" "No." The other one's like,
simple thing. Like,
yeah, his allegiances, like you didn't even do that. It's like, and then like the other one was like funding, whatever. Then the last one was like, "So did they tell you to that you should polygraph him?" And he was just like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Did you do it?" And he's like, "No."
yeah, and then
Okay, let me jump in here again and add a little substance and context to this.
Yeah.
That particular unit is kind of treated as a joke by agents in the field.
Yeah,
The field agents in the various offices that are doing counterintelligence work, it's like those guys are a bunch of knuckleheads. They're in that unit because they're a bunch of knuckleheads, and they really what they think we don't really care. And
oh yeah, shit! Like just wait to see what Helson thinks of this person.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
You're 100% right, because that's the way he treated this, and Durham really went after him for it and was asking him why these things weren't done. And it was there's apparently some controversy of whether their recommendations have any weight to them, and whether they can they can actually get a CHS removed. And
yeah, that's been a raging debate for about 10 years.
So Helson goes, yes. Well, Helson goes, if they tell you have to remove the CHS, you have to do it. And Durham immediately is like, well, like that's actually not allowed to be done anymore.
No, I think he said that doesn't happen. That hasn't happened. Like in maybe in theory, but in practice, that does not happen.
Yeah.
So so
and the reason is, it always comes back to, in the field office, it's up to the SAC. And if the SAC says no, I'm not closing out that source because the source is valuable, he's basically telling headquarters to go pound sand, and he can do that.
Yeah. So going through the list, I'm just looking through the things that were in their recommendations, and they all seemed pretty like good practice kind of stuff that he just decided to not want to do. But one of the things that came out during this discussion was they asked him, so this information that Danchenko is providing you, so what percent of that was open source? And he's like, well, no more than 40 to 50% of it. So half of what Danchenko is providing, that he is this rock star, that he has rebuilt the entire Russian CI division, at least, like 50% of it is just open source stuff. And that's what he's admitting to, right? So
yeah, and he's like, but that's critical to understanding the rest of the intelligence he's giving you, the non-open source stuff.
So that was a point. I'm like, all right, we've got another Crossfire Hurricane situation. Like it seems to me, this is my take on it, was that this guy's bamboozled. He's sucked in, and we've got this is the guy that wrote the Steele dossier. Like, admittedly, he wrote 80% of what was in the Steele dossier, according to Danchenko himself. And like, this is the guy that you're giving all this credence to, and you're not doing due diligence. You're not polygraphing him. You're not following up, finding out what his motivations are. One of the things that they mentioned,
allegiance.
It is allegiance. That's a good one. And one of the things they mentioned.
Let me tell you why they don't want to polygraph him. Because he might fail.
Right. Yeah. That.
Oh yeah.
100%. And that was our take too. Like, just like you mentioned, Chip, was that this is this guy's career. This guy's gravy boat. Like, he does not. If this goes away, what's he got? Like, he's been in for 20 years or something. This is probably his crowning achievement kind of thing, and he wants to sail out on this thing. And that's exactly how he came across. Like, no one's going to rock my boat.
Tell me if you recall, how did he describe? I mean, what's his background in the bureau? If you remember him going through his, his career arc.
He was he majored in microbiology.
No, but in the bureau,
no, that's what I can't remember actually, because
I don't remember.
I mean, they're always going like, "Oh, I went to training in Quantico." I'm like, doesn't it?
I don't remember him doing any criminal stuff. Like, I didn't catch anything that he was in the any criminal division kind of things.
Yeah,
major microbiology.
That's a huge red flag, and what that tells me is about what.
Chip?
To tell us about him continuing to get crucified simply is the function that CI agents never testify in court. He was unprepared for this environment, and he was unprepared for what was about to happen to him. Whereas agents on the criminal side that make cases that go to court, they have to testify. And so they sort of are familiar and understand, the rhythm and what you could say and what you shouldn't say and when you're stepping into something and it sounds like Helson had no idea where this was going to take him.
That's 100%. He was caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if like going forward, like there. So regarding this human validation, like agent person, there was some sort of Helson and her were in conflict, and there, at some point, so the agent who was telling Helson what to do about Igor was telling him stuff, and then he wasn't agreeing with it, and then he said he like filed some other report or some
like a grievance or something.
Yeah, grievance like against what she was recommending, and then Durham fires back with her background and well, first maybe we should go what her assessment of Danchenko was.
Oh yeah, so she, and according to Helson's words, implied that Danchenko may have been GRU, Russian intelligence, and Helson just flatly refused to even consider that. He said he was not GRU, and Durham hit him back. You know that for a fact? He asked him, and that Helson kind of was taken aback at that point and was like, well, I don't, he was stumbling for words, all the indications, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, he absolutely was not even entertaining the notion that Danchenko might have been Russian intelligence, which this night, this is the dispute, and Durham starts listing the credentials of this person that he's in conflict with. 19 years, Army intel, counterintelligence in Europe, and has
19-year veteran military intelligence in Europe.
Yeah, now working for the FBI, and so basically, Helson came back to that with, well, she's never done counterintelligence in the United States. It's totally different. She doesn't know basically she doesn't know anything because this is different.
Yeah, Helson goes like, well, she's not, she did that, but she doesn't have expertise of SVR agents working in America.
Right.
That's what he said was his reply to that. So at that point, I'm like, holy shit, this guy's a fucking idiot.
Yeah, and he's totally closed minded. Like his mind is made up. He's just absolutely not listening. He's not doing some simple things that would even placate. Like, okay, let's give him a polygraph. So what? What do I got to lose? Well, he's got a lot to lose, and that's why he didn't want to do it. I'm absolutely positive. So let's see. That was kind of like the mic drop moment where it's like, wow, this guy he's off the rails, and yeah.
It was incredible. I think that's like when it ended, and all of a sudden, he was basically just him against this veteran intelligence, military intelligence person. Which I mean, like at the same time, I don't believe that Igor was GRU at that time, but I mean, it could be. But he wasn't even like giving that a chance to be a fact. And like once Durham like put that on him, he was frazzled.
Yeah, but it was a contention. I mean, they weren't yelling at each other, but it was pretty close. They were absolutely both hot. And Durham was like, as soon as that redirect started, he came out like a totally different person. He was angry, and he was like,
yeah. And we watched him just like going by a monster, like it.
Yeah, right before that.
Yeah, before I think was it right before the defense or right before the redirect?
Well, I'll tell you what. I've only had a couple of experiences in my career as a prosecutor where there's information you want to get into, and it's been ruled out on 403 grounds, and then the proverbial line is the defense opens the door, and it's like Durham was waiting for that, and when they started, he probably didn't make any objections. He probably let them go down that road about what a great guy and what a great CHS.
Dude, me and MD was talking about that. He was like, Durham just didn't object to any of this stuff
because he knew what he was going to do. He knew what he was going to do.
He rope-a-doped him.
And then they went to the sidebar, and he laid out to Trenga, look, Your Honor, you ruled this out on 403 grounds because it was not probative, or it was insufficiently probative as compared to the prejudice. That's the 403 standard. Not that it's irrelevant, but that the probative value is not high enough to outweigh the prejudice. Well, they just made it more probative by their cross-examination. Now I'm entitled to go after him. Yep. On the basis they opened the door, it should be no holds barred, and apparently Trenga agreed.
Yeah, And they went back. I mean, it went back to the defense, and then it went back to Durham. There were, I don't know how many redirects would be unusual, but it seemed like a lot. Like they went back like 4 times, back and forth about 4 times.
And at one point, Durham was like, "All right, I'm going to return to this," but then Triangle was like, "No, you're finishing it right now."
Yeah, we're going to finish this thing.
Yeah, this thing right now. We're like, "Oh yeah, let's finish it."
So did they finish Helson?
No,
he's still up there.
He's starting over. He's coming back tomorrow. But I think this part of it is currently done.
Yeah, I think the CI investigation thing might be done for Helson, but
hey, I got a question for you, Ship. So he couldn't talk about this with Otten, who was deep into it. Is it possible for Durham to bring back Otten now that this is back on the table?
Sure. Now that the door's open, but he'd have to make a proffer to Triangle that there's something more he can get from Otten.
Right.
That's not simply cumulative of what he's already gotten from Helson. But yeah, he could always call Otten back and could explore with Otten the things that he discussed with Helson about and Danchenko's derogatory information, because the derogatory information was out of bounds, but now it's not. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting though you say that Triangle lets him go back and forth. This is somewhat of a controversial aspect. Younger federal judges are now taking the view that it's direct, cross, redirect, and that's it. Mm-hmm. No recross. That's it. You're done. So when you're cross-examining a witness, you better get everything done on your cross-examination, because you're not going to get another shot. That's what's happening in the Oathkeeper trial. Judge Maida is not allowing the defense to come back. Now, I go back early in my career, into the 90s. I mean, I can remember a case where it was just like you just kept going back and forth until nobody had any more questions. I can think of instances where you went back on like recross or redirect like 5-6 times until you just ran out of questions. But judges don't allow that anymore. But Triangle is a little bit old school. So,
hey guys, I had a quick question. You mentioned the payments that he's approved for by the FBI. Has there been any discussion of him being paid by Christopher Steele? Because I think we had reporting to this effect that he was still engaged by Christopher Steele through like May 2017. So that's after he was engaged as a paid CHS. But has that come in at all?
There was a little bit of discussion about that, like about payments and like about they asked him about like who was his actual boss at that point. They went to that point. It was like, you were getting all this information but you're also giving it back to Steele or whoever. Like who is your actual
Oh yeah, that was one of the validation unit's big things was I wish I had the quote, but it was something along the lines of, we're not comfortable with what his motivations are outside of who's the highest bidder.
Yep.
That was pretty hard hitting.
That was it, yeah.
And they actually earlier, I think in the cross, they talked about, maybe it was, they talked about how they were trying to separate him from Steele, and that was an intentional thing, that they didn't trust Steele, and they felt that Danchenko was so valuable that he shouldn't be talking to him. So they sort of poisoned the well with,
Nelson was very anti-Steele.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out who's there's information coming in like that we've talked about before, like and things are like who is the liar and who is actually telling the truth. But Helson was on Danchenko's side, very much so.
Let me jump back in here and suggest that, and I don't know who Danchenko's lawyers are, but now we got an idea how he paid for them.
Oh yeah,
that was always the mystery. How is Danchenko paying for this? But now we've got a little bit of idea how he's able to do it. But let me suggest, now having been a defense lawyer for 9 years, that the defense might have done this knowing what was going to happen, but tactically they filed the motion in limine to keep the 2009 aspect out, because they didn't want it to come out in opening statement or to have testimony about it before they had a chance with Helson to make Danchenko look like a hero. And they probably fully expected that would open the door, but at least they would be on the record first with the jury with their, hagiography of his background, painting him as just the super source. And knowing that that would probably open the door. Now they're going to argue, they're going to argue to try and go against it, but they probably had to know that was likely going to be the outcome. Now, but those are trial tactics. You kind of weigh the pros and cons of your choices, and like I said, they kept it out so the jury didn't hear about it until they made him look like a good guy, knowing that then Durham was going to go after him. So it was,
and the defense, like in one of these back and forth, Sears is up there and he's just like, all right, we all know there was a counterintelligence investigation into my client in 2009. It's like, we all know that. He was saying that directly. So like for me, I was like, yeah, like he had to game theorize that could have happened or whatever. But it was still amazing to watch.
And at the end of the day, like going to measure it, did Helson help the defense enough on cross? Because at the end of cross, it seemed like this is over. Like, especially a couple of those charges are just done because the guy that he lied to just said he didn't feel he was lied to, and also he was literally told the truth. So I don't know how that could possibly stand up. Now, did this entire mess in redirect wreck his credibility enough that this guy is just an unreliable narrator that we shouldn't give his opinion any weight? I don't know. That's maybe is it a draw? Is it advantage Durham? I don't know about that. As far as this particular case, we learned a lot, and it's great for us. I don't know if it's great for this case.
Yeah, because it was definitely just like the defense winning in the cross, and then maybe Durham might have brought it back to even, or if that. But it was still.
I think a big cloud of smoke is probably the defense's favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I posted this on Twitter today. I know you guys can't have electronics in the courtroom, so you're not seeing this in real time. But I suggested on Twitter today that I kind of get the feeling, especially by Durham's actual personal involvement and the way he's conducting himself, as described by you, that he's going to put on a case that technically meets all of the elements of legitimate prosecution, having evidence of all the elements of all the charged crimes. But this is more about him wanting to get information in the public sector that might otherwise get buried in a report and redacted on 6E grounds. And so he's willing to lose the battle in an effort to win the war.
Yeah. And it's very, it seems like that because he's just trying to get everything out there. And it's interesting the way he's utilized. I guess we didn't talk about this, but Keelty, it was Keelty, right? He's going after Dolan. Durham only goes after the feds.
Yeah. Durham's only doing the feds.
And it's I don't know if that's just, and he has a lot of gravitas, and I don't know if it's just because of his reputation that he can do that easier, but he's when on his direct against Helson, I'm just okay, this guy just seems like a nice old grandpa. And then he just freaking brought the fire, and it was pretty sweet.
I think that theory is definitely viable, and that's kind of the way I the more we've been thinking about it as the night goes on, this issue with the CI at the FBI is maybe at least as disturbing as Crossfire Hurricane. I mean, it's not maybe as political, but this is continuing. This is happening. This right now. These same people are running this kind of stuff, and they don't know what they're doing. They're gullible, and they're apparently running people. The fact that Danchenko could rise to this level of importance is shocking.
Yeah, and the Kyle Seraphin thing, the intelligence thing, CI capabilities and what the hell they're doing is ridiculous. And Durham obviously has a very negative view of Crossfire Hurricane. He fucking hates them.
Every time Crossfire Hurricane came up, he gave it some kind of a shot. He'd take a swipe at it.
We should bring Regina on because she was there too. So
she's on. Just get up.
One question.
Regina, you can unmute anytime.
Go ahead, Chip.
It doesn't sound like they asked the question yet because you haven't commented on it. But one question I would have asked in Durham's shoes, and tell me if anything like this came out, is I would ask Helson if Helson's ever used any information obtained from Danchenko, directly sourced it to Danchenko in a statement under oath to a court for any kind of warrant.
No, we were talking. That's it. Did not come out in that kind of context, but yeah, that's what we were like. Has anyone been convicted? Is there anything does it have legs? What, you get 2,000 cases, but they could all be bullshit. I mean,
yeah, it's only
2,000 hard crossfire.
He just stood on these IRR reports, whatever the fuck those are. They were introduced. He was saying like these IRR reports are introduced to the intelligence community, and Igor was the main source in a lot of these, and they're corroborated and blah blah blah.
Whatever that means.
He basically said it wasn't raw intelligence; it's raw light because there's some corroboration to what Igor was saying. So
it's an analytical work product.
Yep. So 100%. Regina, I saw your hand up. You can just unmute and just go. She was there.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic.
I was just gonna say, like, the way you guys described that, it was like the exact same thing with Oughton, like the first day and a half. Like the first day, we didn't start till like the afternoon after jury selection, and then it was him basically for a day and a half. Same thing. They were all loving him up. Durham seemed like so weak with him. He just was like his best friend. Defense was trying to connect him as a brilliant analyst and Danchenko as a brilliant analyst, and they were both like on par as being a connect the dots people. I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then Durham came out and was on fire, like same exact thing, same playbook, boom boom. And then you under criminal investigation out, and I was like, whoa. And he was like going after him. That's all.
No, yeah, because we didn't get to see that. So, like, was it like similar? Like, I mean, like, which day did you like better? I saw this and I was like, this was
fire. Like a mic drop. I felt like this was something special. Like, this doesn't happen every day.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I felt for that. I felt bad for that Life and Liberty guy because the morning was so boring. And
shout out, Brian.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, you should have stayed for the afternoon because the afternoon was fire. But
let me weigh in here on Durham just a bit. I think my history is correct, but I'll be correct. I'll stand corrected if somebody has something more. Durham, I don't think has ever been a political appointee in the sense he's never been an appointed U.S. attorney. I think he's been an interim a couple of times. But Durham
he's appointed by Trump.
Well, was he appointed U.S. attorney by Trump?
Yep. Well, I mean, Jeff Sessions won. I think Jeff Sessions won. He was definitely appointed, though, yeah.
Okay, well, but before that, I don't think he ever had been.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
35 years, he's been a courtroom prosecutor.
Yep.
He is a guy that is well acquainted with the path from counsel table to the lectern, and he knows what he's doing in a courtroom.
Yeah, he was flawless. And like you're saying, like he was acting at U.S. attorney at some point, but he was mainly just like counselor to the U.S. attorney, prosecutor, career prosecutor. And that was like, I mean, just the difference between him and Mueller was obvious, but Mueller's like brain was dead. He had Biden brain all day, but he was nice. Like I was, okay. So like, I mean, this is like a little story, like, but when we were watching, like I've never been in a courtroom before like that. But when we were watching, I'm like, this is something that was really fucking. This was art. This was art. What he was doing, and I compared to say the only other time I've ever seen anything like this was like when I was like roped into watching this bullfighting thing, this bullfight one time in Alicante, and we were just watching it. Like one guy came up and he did the little bullfight. He killed the bull. Like it looked nice, and then this next guy came up. And me and my friends just like, oh my God, this guy looks like a good bullfighter. Like we had never seen the game. We're like, this is art. Whatever the hell he's doing, this is art. And then he won. And we're like, holy crap, that guy was really good at bullfighting, I think. We went and like researched it. And we're like, this is El Hooley. This is the youngest bullfighter to ever be in like the Major League Bullfighting. And he's like the #1 bullfighter in the world at that time. And like, that's the only thing I could ever compare it to. Where like something I didn't really understand, but like that was the best bullfighter in the world. And you could just tell, and not even ever watching bullfighting before. When Durham did that, I'm like, this guy's a good trial lawyer. Like, and I'd never seen it before. That's the only thing I can compare it to.
Yeah, it was impressive. It was really cool to see. And, he's not done, I guess.
Helson's still up there.
So Helson's still out there. They're not going to talk anymore about this particular subject, I guess, but there's more redirect that he has to do. And there was a lot of other stuff that was like a tiny bit of the cross. So there could be a bunch of things he wants to hit on. I think he said he might have like Well, like a half an hour more.
Yeah, he said half an hour more on Helson. And the interesting thing will be to be seen is the rest of the witnesses. There are 3 more FBI agents. It'll be interesting if Durham covers all those. But
yeah, so even if Auten doesn't come back, these people, at least one of them, I think was Auten's replacement, maybe, or not Auten, Soma's replacement. And that's the other thing. So we found out that the co-handler was
Jason Rule.
Yeah, Jason Rule. He's not testifying, which is I don't know why. But.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Jason Rule's opinion of Igor Danchenko, but I guess he didn't matter as much. I don't know. Co-handler, whatever the fuck that is.
Oh, I'd like to hear his opinion of Helson. I mean,
yeah, Helson too.
Like you get a partner that's like a Kool-Aid drinker. That who knows what he thinks.
But like Helson, like it's weird though because he was definitely to me like since he was Washington Field Office like counterintelligence. And he did not want anything to do with Crossfire Hurricane. I'm like, this guy probably is like buddy with William Barnett or something like that. And he's like, you don't not want to be any part of that, which I'd probably look into. But
yeah, but
that's just I'm going to guess that is 1,000% correct. I have said online that Steve Soma wanted off Crossfire Hurricane, and a huge tell, an internal tell. Is the person that replaced him sent him an email asking some question, and twice, and Soma didn't respond either time.
Yep.
That's kind of a thing in the Bureau that if you want to be done with something and you don't want to be attached to it anymore, you don't respond to anything in writing. It's like the way that communication will take place is I'll meet you in the break room or I'll see you in the parking lot. But I'm not putting anything in writing on that case again. And that's what Soma did.
Yeah, well, we were kind of thinking that. So they hand Danchenko off to Helson, and we're like, was this like a hot potato? Are they trying to get rid of this guy? And Helson was just dumb enough to like hold on to the hot potato, and hold on for dear life. And it got.
You turned that hot potato into truffle fries. I'll tell you what.
But now it makes sense, like Shep was saying, how the defense was just teeing up these like crazy things, and he could just go, yep. And the whole contradiction with like Steele putting in the dossier or just telling them, oh, Danchenko met Milian in 3 different cities. And they're like, what's up with that, Danchenko? Steele told us this. And he's just like, well, I was just tired of talking about it, so I didn't correct Steele. And like, that's what they get. They're like, they were satisfied with that. And Helson's like, yeah, he was tired. I mean, this guy's taking down the entire like Trump presidency because he was tired. It was so crazy. And they even brought Danchenko's the one who brought and set up the FBI trip to Cyprus to meet Galkina. I was just like, what is going on here? I felt like I was in an altered universe.
Yeah, that was a good catch. You did.
Yeah, Helson just wanted. It seemed like all right. At some point, there was like we're just done. Like Igor was feeding him shit on other things that he was just loving. So then he was like, Crossfire Hurricane's done. Let's do all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened until 2020. Until him and us all outed the entire network, and Igor could not be used anymore.
But now we're discussing like, all right, these 2,000 cases or these 35, whatever, like they're all tainted. Like what? Just like Ship said, to do any of them, none of them are going to end up in court because that's not how these things work. So, I mean, someone's got to go through these and look at and just see if the entire edifice is bullshit. This is all. As far as I'm concerned, it's a big house of cards.
Let me jump in. This I put this on Twitter today, and this is probably an unpopular view, but I will say this: Danchenko, because of his background, he was going to have some insight to offer, and we don't know.
Definitely,
nobody knows what legitimate mileage, Helson and the rest of the CI division on Russian, what mileage they got. They may have made some very good progress on stuff that was otherwise dead in the water or things they didn't know anything about. I have repeatedly said in various places, greeted with various kinds of responses that, my 22 years in the government led me to always kind of first think about incompetence before I think about corruption. Okay. And now you guys are seeing a little bit of a window into it, right? You're seeing the actual human beings that do this work and how they can screw it up. All right. I had plenty of experiences like that, in my career, but it's the same on the Russian side. There's idiots working for Russia that, he might very well have been able to help with, give some insight into, give some locations, connect people to each other, based on historical information that he had, or, conversations with too much vodka involved. So it's a little too early to just kind of, to say it's all shit and not worth anything.
Oh, I don't think they're saying that. I think they're just saying that, like,
you got to remember on the intelligence side, it's just all about information. It's not about convicting people. It's just about having more information today than you had yesterday. Now, you're going to have to sort through it. Some's going to be good, some's going to be bad. But you don't just refuse to take it because it's mixed.
Right. I think our takeaway was that the problem is we got knuckleheads like Helson that are being fooled, like are true believers in a guy like Danchenko. If those are the guys that are sorting through it, what hope do we have?
But also, we knew who Danchenko's sources were for the Steele dossier, that they somehow improved.
Right.
In that time period. So, I'm a little bit skeptical of, who is actual contact. Well, who the fuck he's talking to after that? But
yeah, but that's what has to get run down. And when he's working directly for the FBI, as opposed to the third party attribution, through Steele back to his connections at some bar in Russia or Galinka or whatever the one's name is in Cyprus, that was private sector third party for pay work. But when an agent is going to put his career on the line by relying on somebody, he's going to ask for more. And
did
he's
he
not going to. What?
That's the question. Did he ask for more?
The defense was like. The defense was like, he was talking, he even brought up Sergei Abishev again, even past 2017, he was talking to Sergei Abishev. I'm like, oh, seriously, that's his big source again? Because he brought it up. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then he said he had the spreadsheet and he had the 4 sources that Helson and, Danchenko were going through. And the 4 sources were Vorontsov, Abachev, Galkina, Milian. And Helson's like, yep. And even Helson told never, ever, ever went against Danchenko being a truthful person. Said it report after report after report. And you're like, how could he think those 4 people were legit sources?
Well, the defense propped up Abishev is a really good source. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. I wonder if Helson thought he was really good.
Yeah, I wanted to drill down on that, guys. Are you saying that those 4 sources, those sub-sources for the dossier, were actually used in other investigations?
I think they seemed interested in her. And
yeah, I don't know what, it must have been that, I don't know about, they were bringing him up again, Vorontsov and whatever, but it seemed like the defense brought up Abishev out of nowhere, sort of. And obviously Olga was one, but the interesting thing was he was talking about how Igor would. Oh, that's what it was. The defense was Helson was like, oh yeah, he even let me listen into conversations with Abishev that Danchenko was having with Abishev, and that also that Igor would record his conversation with his sources and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's standard. That's standard tradecraft. The fact to say that he let me do that, it's well, if you don't let me do that, I'm going to close you out.
Right. And that was what was interesting, because when Durham was drilling down on him, and why didn't you do this? Why didn't you polygraph him? All these things. And it was always, well, he agreed to everything. We just spent an hour of the defense asking you, did he ever deny a request? Did he ever say no to anything? No. He was cooperative every single time. So you didn't ask him for all these things, even though he has never said no to you, but you did. And I thought that was pretty powerful.
But at the same time, if you go through Steele's depositions and stuff like that, when supposedly Igor was still probably working with, he was oh, like Danchenko's source network is kind of compromised, so I'm using this other source. So I'm like, okay, so like, what was Igor's new source network?
Yeah, where all these people come from if he couldn't, assuming he delivered to steal whatever he could. It's curious. It's disturbing. I guess, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying this is a whole bunch of questions. This guy does not seem like the best and the brightest at all to be making. I mean, he just seems gullible and he seems invested in his source. And to me, that's like, you have to absolutely rip into this thing and find out every detail, because I don't think anything they've done is trustworthy.
So you described him as 20 plus years. He's kind of getting on. He's approaching like retirement age, 50.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I tell you, this CI, especially in that kind of stage, that's where guys go to retire. I mean, there are a lot of marginal agents that sort of get pushed into CI because they don't have to write affidavits, they don't have to go to court, they don't have to do a lot of taxing in-person interviews. They write up national security letters for, email information and phone data information, and they just kind of toil away their days doing that kind of stuff. It's kind of out of the way, no harm, should come from this, and guys just ride out their career. They're RIP. They're retired in place, and he seems to sort of have some of that whiff to him based upon your description.
yeah. I think that's right. I'd say that plus this is maybe his career achievement, or this is how he's not going to want to go out on something that blows up in his face, so he just refuses to allow it to, or won't. And I'm not saying
he also did the Butina investigation as well. So he probably thinks that was great. I don't know if this stuff would compromise anything that happened with the Maria Butina investigation, but I kind of liked him. Besides, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't find him a liar or anything like that. I just felt like he was absolutely drinking Kool-Aid, and in a way, he felt gullible, in the same way that a lot of these guys that just it was too good to be true. And it's like, look, it's fine for you and me and Fool to like run into something that's too good to be true and buy into it, but these are the guys that are on the front lines of not allowing that to happen. That it's counterintelligence. You should, if these guys can't not be fooled, then what hope do we have?
They're like, was outing Igor Danchenko a threat to our national security? And Helson was like, yes, I think so. And that's when like everybody's ran out.
Oh yeah, it was like the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to America. I'm not like.
Oh my God!
I hope the transcripts reflected as well as it happened in the courtroom, because it was that you would not believe how much it built him up. And maybe, Ship, I'm interested to see how the feeling I got was the defense was just like, we're burnishing his reputation. Like, I don't know if that has anything to do with the case, but we're gonna try to save this guy's reputation right now, and maybe that's not a great idea.
No. I mean, it sounds like they got what they wanted, which was, for Helser basically to say he didn't feel like he was lied to. And that's going to be tough on Trenga. When Trenga, they file a Rule 29 motion for acquittal, and Trenga's going to say, the prosecution says he lied to the FBI, but the FBI agent who did the interview testified he didn't lie. So what? How do I let this go to the jury?
Can he can let the jury render their verdict and then make that decision, right?
Absolutely, and that's what judges always do, because the judge might have in his head, look, this guy can't be convicted on this record, but I'll let the jury take me off the hook. And then if the jury doesn't take him off the hook, then he enters a judgment of acquittal. The difference is, if he enters a judgment of acquittal, the government can appeal. If the jury acquits, there's no appeal. That's why they let the jury have the first crack.
It's interesting that the jury seemed very engaged. There was maybe one or two that were a little just done with it. But
one was pretty hot, though.
How late did this go?
Oh, it went to 6:00. I mean, and that they cut it off at 6. Like, all right, that's when Durham just said, all right, it's 6:00. I'm done.
I'm so used to my trial days over this history of my career being like 8:30 to 4:30. The idea that they go to 6 o'clock in trial. I mean, they almost doing that over in D.C. They're going to like 5:15, 5:30 some days. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah, he's trying to pack it in, and I think he said they were going to go till 4:30 or 5 tomorrow since it's a Friday. So give the jury a little break. But yeah, I don't think the prosecution going to finish tomorrow. I mean, there's 3 more, so they're going to finish off.
It's gonna be. They got to finish Helson and then do 3 more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the case. That's all.
Yeah, and if the defense,
unless they want to bring Auden back or something.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? I have some questions.
Hey, King.
What did you guys learn about the transition from Houghton and the Crossfire Hurricane team to Hawson?
Basically, Soma and Auden met with Helson late January, and they're like, "Hey, like we think this guy should be developed as a CHS or whatever," and that happened in March where he actually took him on. But Auden was on the CI investigation into Danchenko back in 2009, and he did not mention that at all to Helson, and that was basically the transition. But Auden was also throughout all that and throughout 2017, Auden was also communicating with Helson, and basically Auden was basically Helson's handler regarding Crossfire Hurricane in the dossier. It seemed like he was basically like telling him like what you should ask Igor, stuff like that.
Yeah, because he wasn't read in on Crossfire Hurricane, and he said he didn't know anything about it really. He was learning things.
And he doesn't remember if he read the 3-day EC and stuff like that. So
yeah, and apparently he intentionally didn't join Crossfire Hurricane, but I think that might have been a later decision. It seemed like it was odd to us that why are they bringing this guy in that's not Crossfire Hurricane, not getting read in, to be his handler, and then every question that when they're trying to run this down about Sergey or whatever it was, they had to go through Helson and have him go ask the questions and report back, and that's just a terrible way to try to get information because it's a telephone game and there's you can't do follow-ups and whatever else, and nobody, Helson didn't seem to think that was a good idea. He said that went on for a bit, and it tapered off just sort of naturally, I think.
Let me jump in to say that's the FBI way. That's the way the FBI does business. That have those kind of communications go through a handler, even though it is a terrible way of doing business, and I griped about it for years.
That's basically what they did with all the FISAs too. They just launder it through somebody who's not very read in. So when they put their hand up and swear to it, they don't know. As far as they know, they're telling the truth.
Yeah, a lot of it is what they call the lead system, and this is not exactly the same, but the FBI does not fly case agents around the country to do interviews on their cases. They will send so if you've got a witness in Albuquerque for a case in Washington, they'll send a lead to the Albuquerque office, assign that interview.
How'd you know I was stationed in Albuquerque with my dad. True story.
Who were talking? Who said that?
Oh no, my dad was SAC of Albuquerque one time, and that's where I was there for a while.
Oh, all right. Oh, no, I didn't know that. There's another reason that Albuquerque popped in my head, but I'll leave that alone. But so what they'll do is they send a lead to Albuquerque, and then a supervisor in Albuquerque assigns the lead to some squad agent. The squad agent goes out and does the interview, and the squad agent knows almost nothing about the case that he's doing an interview on, so he can't do really meaningful follow-up. And then he writes his 302 of the interview and sends it back to the case agent in wherever that asked for it, and that's the system the FBI uses, contrary to the DEA, which flies agents all over the country to do interviews on their own cases because they know them. It's just kind of a historical artifact that goes back, frankly, decades and decades to when intercontinental or cross-continental travel was more difficult and more expensive, and the Bureau developed this system, and they've just always stuck with it.
Were these interviews? Were they interviews, or were they just a half a page of questions to ask the guy in a recording and get an answer to send back, or were they real interviews?
They did they kind of described it as a pre-interview sometime in January after the conference.
Yeah, they basically just met. Helson and maybe Rule met with Igor. No attorney involved there.
Right, and also no recording, and apparently no 302.
Right.
So, which is great. And then in March/April, the first interview was that Helson did that he recorded.
Like March 16th.
That was an official first interview.
Did Helson have a script to use in the interview?
There were, I don't know if it was in that first interview, but as it went along for sure, that was some of the exhibits were questions that were sent down. Actually, the Mueller team sent down the June one. I got the notes somewhere. I think it was in June. That were like half the questions were written out by the Mueller team. It was in two different handwritings, and one of them was Helson's, and the other one was what the Mueller team on behalf of Crossfire Hurricane. It was questions, the Steele dossier questions that they sent down. And I think that probably only happened for a very short time, which is we all kind of thought like the Mueller team just figured this was bullshit very quickly and just moved on from it. I think that's when the questions stopped being funneled.
Yeah, and the March one, he said basically that the Crossfire Hurricane gave him things to ask him, and he would ask Igor, and that's basically where he's getting all the information to ask Igor, and then that turned into like conversations about other topics that Helson was interested in that interview.
Yeah, it seemed like a chore to him, like to get to the questions he wanted to ask.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then I remember Helson was saying like part of his job was to drive a wedge or something between Steele and Danchenko. Like, so it went from him like trying to like corroborate the sources. He was saying like, oh, I thought Danchenko was hiding communications from Millian. I think there were more of them. So it started like him like doing the corroboration on the dossier to then he's basically said, we stopped doing the dossier, and he goes, it was what it was. And then they switched to him getting paid and, party time, and the dossier was over.
Yep, it was completely gone. Like once Helson in his mind was basically just like, well, this Millian call will never be, he'll never figure out like what actually happened there, and he believed Igor that the call happened, and he's moving on to the things he's actually interested in because it's not verifiable, that call or whatever.
Yeah, he seemed to just go along with it. Like it doesn't make any sense, but I don't think he gave it too much thought, and just like however it happened, if it happened, I don't care. I'm not going to think about it.
And Danchenko was tired. Don't forget that.
He looked all right today, at least, though.
No, that's why he didn't.
Rode an elevator with Igor Danchenko. Yeah. Good man.
Oh yeah, you guys got to tell a story about that for sure.
Oh, so like I don't even know when we were going down.
It's at the end. It
wasn't at the end. It was like one of the breaks because all the lawyers like went across the street.
Right, yeah. So
like we get into the elevator and Toria's there, and I've never like met Toria. I'm like, and like I see Igor coming in. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. I'm like, hey Toria, like Fool Nelson, nice to meet you. Jimmy, like my real name, blah blah blah. And I'm like, you're doing good work, whatever. And I'm just like, oh, this is probably gonna be great. And like I don't know what she was thinking about that, but I'm like, oh, I hope Igor heard that.
Oh yeah, 100%. He was standing in front of us, and his wife just kind of turned and like looked at us and just had this like surprised look. And I was watching Igor, and he was just stone faced, just staring straight ahead. I'm like, oh man.
He got off, and then we just got some coffee or whatever, and then.
Oh no, that's not all that happened. Then we saw Durham just house of a Monster Energy.
Yeah. We went to the break room, and then me and MB are sitting there. I had already got the Monster, and then Durham comes in, and he's looking in there. He couldn't really figure out how to pay with the electronic thing, but he definitely got the Monster, and he housed it.
Yeah, and we're laughing. We're like, oh, it's about to turn right now. Yeah, and then it did.
Oh man, it was great.
I think the comedy was Dolan in the morning, though. I mean, that was some good questions when they were talking about that line about that GOP woman, and then the lawyer's like, "Now, when you say she, who are you referring to?" And Dolan's like, "The woman on cable news."
Yeah, like
Like,
I was watching some woman on cable news.
Yeah, that's your
That was basically the
GOP.
source
So
of
your
that
GOP
report.
friend that you had a drink with was the woman on cable news.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just like, yeah, I just lied to Igor because I'm throwing him a bone. I was getting like 50 emails a day. I'm like, this guy's like setting up this YPO stuff. I'm like, oh, I just watched some Fox News and I just threw him a bone here, and he moved on to the next thing. He's like, yeah, I lied to him.
Yeah, I do it all the time. It's my job.
Yeah, it's my job.
Apart from asking,
and then that was funny with
Danchenko about.
Well, they were really contradictive too, like Dolan and Danchenko. Dolan was saying he only met him when, he wanted Galkina hookup, but then Danchenko's like, I've known him for 20 years. I don't know. That was kind of strange.
Yeah, he was like, oh yeah, I might have met him, but Fiona Hill finally really introduced him to me or whatever.
Right.
Has anybody in this trial testified as to what Danchenko told the various FBI agents from time to time? What actually was said precisely on the call, the million call?
It has not been.
Yeah.
Get into the details of what happened on the call, but it's just basically this call is what basically is the source of 95.
They had the recordings.
They had recordings of his talks with Helson.
Yeah,
and they kept on coming back to this call.
Do they include
exactly what was provided? It was basically, they didn't really get into what was actually provided.
He was never asked. If that's the case, he was never asked, not even in January.
Well, it was basically where did 95 come from?
Right.
Before 95, where did it come from? And he was just basically this call.
Never did he get asked the open-ended question, what did this anonymous person say to you? Give me everything you remember. Never, not once.
No, it was never built down for sure. Because
think of that.
Yeah. Because so much was in the dossier. When you go to the EC, it's oh yeah, all this is from Million, but there's only one call, a 10 to 15 minute call, and all of 95, 97, and 80 and onwards. Even 80 was impossible, obviously, because of the communication dates and whatever. All of that was in this 10 to 15 minute call was supposedly coming from Million. But yeah, they never drilled down to what was actually the actual information.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but
also at the same time, he's like, well, Steele wrote the report, so I can't really say that that came from me, but it looks like stuff that I basically said from this 10 to 15 minute call. So there was this little, that was kind of a point where Steele wrote the reports, not Igor.
Yeah, so they're pointing a finger at each other the whole trial. Steele.
But if you're an investigator, if you're investigating something and you've got source B giving you details and source B says it came from source A, you don't give the details to source A and say, you agree with this? Yes, okay, check the box and go on. You get his independent recollection to see if somebody's lying.
It didn't seem like Kelson was said this specific details, because Kelson was just talking about well, Steele wrote the Steele dossier. They really asked him who wrote the dossier, and Kelson was Steele.
Yeah, without Steele to testify, it was kind of a mess. And that, I think the thing that really is tripping up and Durham, and the thing he spent a lot of time on trying to overcome was, that Danchenko said it's in the record that he never called Dolan, or I'm sorry, that it was a phone call, and whether that was on his cell phone, which we know it wasn't because of the phone records, but could it have been a WhatsApp, some kind of an app? And Durham's bending over backwards to try to show that well, probably not, but it's like probably not. It's not a very good answer, and it's all very circumstantial and very well. When he wrote his emails, here's his email. Did he have his WhatsApp? In the signature line? No, he didn't. But it's also definitely in the record that he did use WhatsApp quite a bit in certain circumstances. So I don't know how that. I don't know how you overcome reasonable doubt with that, because if I was on that jury, I'd say you've given me the phone records, but WhatsApp is something he used, and Durham. It almost like Durham was highlighting it because he was trying so hard to fight that it was in. It's going to be in the jurors' heads. So I'd be worried if I was Durham.
I would too, because his FBI. I don't know what to say about him. That's as a crooked of investigation as I've seen. Seriously.
Yeah, we just kept going back to this is his witness that he is taking a blowtorch to right now.
That with the Helson interviews of Danchenko, I think they said like March, May, September were recorded. And I think he was saying like the October one that wasn't recorded was when that YouTube thing came up about recognizing his voice. Had it ever come up before that October 2017 interview? Because it seemed like that's when it came up.
I think
He
that's in
mentioned it in January.
I think that's in the January
Yeah.
when he's like, "Well, I that's how he basically said like, oh, this sounds like Sergey Million because I saw this YouTube thing." And
it wasn't in January. It was in one of the March one.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting because they didn't highlight that today. For some reason, they were highlighting it.
Yeah, it was mentioned at Horowitz, so it definitely was. It was in one of the early interviews, and I remember checking that there were some YouTube things of Danchenko or a Million that came on in February. So there were prior to. So it was a bit of a moving basis. So in January, he might not have had the same inventory of Million videos as he would have in March. So that could have been an opportunistic comment subsequent to the January interview.
Yeah.
So crazy. And the fact that stupid Helson was thinking that Danchenko was hiding that he was talking to Million more. I was I don't know, I was blown away by that.
Yeah. Jamie, one thing that you mentioned about the 4 interviews, I don't think that Danchenko didn't lay claim to those 4 interviews all coming from that one call. It was just sitting like that. It was obvious, and it was sitting there like a bad smell, but none of the FBI agents seemed to do anything about it.
What do you mean by the four interviews? You mean the reports?
The 4 reports from one interview.
Yeah, I guess that's probably more implied. But he basically he went through and he's like, Million is the source of all these reports, right? And then he basically just said, I only had like this 10 to 15 minute call with him. So it's kind of
no. Igor. There's nothing in the East. There's no evidence that Igor said that Million was the source of all four reports. I mean, that's what Steele said, not what Igor said.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
And in particular, Igor for report 80, Igor definitely distanced himself from that because he said that was from Vorontsov. So then you're down to the 102 and 105, or sorry, 100 and 102, and he wasn't asked about those in the interview.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I guess Steele's. I guess that's like what Helson was talking about, like because they couldn't rectify what was going on between Steele's claims that Million was the source of 80 and
Yeah, they pretty much bought in 100% that Steele embellished everything and mixed everything up till it was incomprehensible, and just took Danchenko's word for literally everything. They're just like to the point where he was like, I never felt like you misled us or lied to us about anything, which is a bold statement.
Well, but there's a case that Steele did sort of embellish those things. I mean, it's really hard. We've talked about this endlessly, and one day you think Danchenko made up some of the stuff, and another day that Steele added on to it. But they don't seem to have pinned it down.
Absolutely not. No, they didn't seem to have much incentive to either.
Yes.
Did you just one other question? In the handoff of Danchenko to Helson, I mean that seemed like a puzzle. I mean that's new information and new timing. I reread the Otten and Soma transcripts because they were asked the Senate questioners in those interviews were they were trying to figure out what happened and how the Danchenko stuff got lost. Because everybody's losing sight of in this trial is that what Danchenko said in the January interview that was true blew up the entire notion that Steele had some wonderful network. I mean, they had a guy they'd never met, an anonymous phone call. I mean, this was not a well-validated network as they just represented, and that gets lost. What was the basis of parking Danchenko to Helson right after the interview? And Otten and Soma were a bit evasive, I think, when you relook at the Senate transcripts about what happened afterwards, because after the interview, because the Senate guys were trying to find out. I mean, their questioning was terrible, but they were, somebody that wanted to tell what was happening could have.
Yeah, you can't tell the motive, but that Otten didn't tell him that Igor that in 2009 was under a CI investigation. It tells me that the motive wasn't good.
Yeah, pass it along. That was my take, and yeah.
To weigh in here on Stephen's question, this kind of decision making, in my experience, there wouldn't be a whole lot of explicit conversation, and nobody's going to write it down. It's going to be kind of wink and a nod stuff that we need to move this guy out of, he might be useful, we don't know, but we need to move him out of sight. And so they bring in a WFO agent. Is Helson at WFO?
Yep.
Okay, so you bring in a WFO agent off of a CI squad that does Russian work, who's not connected to Crossfire Hurricane, and you say, hey, here's this guy, here's his background. He's involved in Crossfire Hurricane, but it doesn't look like he's going to have much further utility. And but we think you might be able to make use of him elsewhere. These conversations are going to be face to face, and they're going to involve people like Struck. And then the decision is going to be made, and there's not going to be a lot of written explanation of why. And then, and like Otten said, he did not give Helson the derogatory information because frankly, it wasn't need to know. Helson is going to be working Danchenko going forward, and what might have been true about Helson or suspected about Danchenko, 9 years earlier, is of no consequence.
Well, Ship. I mean that sounds like how they sort of technologically did it, but in terms of, say, the question that Bill Barr wanted answered is, why did this thing get buried? Because I mean these guys, sure buried Danchenko deep for 4 years.
Yeah, and water back there or something.
and they buried his derogatory information about the Steel Network for years. So I mean, it just baffles me that Durham isn't investigating what he was supposed to be investigating.
Try this. Chip, I muted you for a second. Do you have like water running back there or something? We can't hear you, by the way.
I'm gonna have to move. I will confess that in the 35-degree weather of Lake Tahoe, I had my feet in a hot tub.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can hear you.
That's living.
No, it's no problem. I was just making sure that you're okay.
No, that's what it was. But now I've gone back outside in the 35-degree weather. No, I think, Stefan, the answer is there were people at a level concerned about how Danchenko might blow up what they were doing, that they wanted him parked somewhere out of the way. Maybe he could do other work that might be useful, which would keep him and keep the whole thing under wraps. And as I think has now been definitively established, when Mueller took over in May, it took them until June to start asking questions about the dossier and Danchenko. And when those questions were answered, they were done. They moved on to Manafort. They turned their attention to Manafort's history and personal connection with Ukraine and Russia, and that became sort of ground central for their investigation. And they wanted nothing to do with the Steele dossier. So Danchenko basically just became, I think, at that point for them, an afterthought and a guy that just needed to sort of be hidden away in a closet, not to be heard from again.
That makes sense, given that, like, immediately after that interview in January with Danchenko, the 3-day interview or whatever, that their takeaway from that, with all the problems in it, was let's pay this guy and make him, let's upgrade this guy's situation. And they immediately, got the ball rolling to make him a confidential human source.
Well, they gave him a uniform and put him on the team.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's what they did. They gave him a uniform and they said, "You're now part of the FBI."
Yeah, people were complaining about Durham not going about the FBI, but Danchenko is the FBI.
No,
I think he should be going after the FBI, like Steve was saying. Like, it doesn't seem like Durham's going after the actual Crossfire Hurricane team at all.
It's interesting that the way this is laid out, a lot of stuff's coming into the record, and the fact that this stuff about the counterintelligence division is coming to the record is great. I mean, we wouldn't have known about a lot of this, and that's, I really hope that gets followed up, and maybe that's going to be up to Congress to, rip this apart and find out what's going on. But, are we just going to get a report after this, and whatever the parts of the report we're allowed to see? I don't know.
It was weird to me. They were just like, this guy is basically, like, he's reshaped the entire way the FBI perceives,
it's
like,
bad. Yeah. Everybody's
helping, like, malign Russian intelligence. I'm like, why is the FBI doing this stuff? Like, why is the FBI involved in this? Shouldn't it be the CIA or?
You guys all got to read this transcript when it comes out and just see how much they were just blowing up Danchenko's reputation and making him into this amazing hero. It's ridiculous. And that it's we've talked about this, that the FBI being involved in counterintelligence like this is a disaster. It's been going on since 9/11, if not before. And that maybe bigger than the takeaway of anything else that we've ever talked about is that's got to be separated out. Something's got to be done to change this, because it is just getting worse and worse and worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And even after the Christopher Steele stuff, apparently it got worse. Like, they took the guy that wrote the Steele dossier and they promoted him, and they put him on the team. Like, that's where we're at right now.
Hey guys,
was there a badge and a gun in the elevator?
Was there anything more about why Danchenko was made a CHS in the first place, or did they not really get into that?
That might have been an Otten question we didn't catch. Yeah.
Otten was just like, oh yeah, you probably just developed this dude. Yeah, I didn't really hear why.
Helson just said he was.
I think they just wanted to corroborate. Mainly, they wanted to corroborate the Steele dossier.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But why would they? What would be the rationalization for making him a CHS? I mean, they could have done it like they did with Rick Gates and just put a blowtorch on him.
Yeah, I think they found him useful in more ways, which they obviously did.
The mindset that his
I don't know how you corroborate the Steele dossier with
Helson still
the source of the Steele dossier.
Yeah.
No,
I think they just wanted the sources. I don't even know. It's freaking weird.
No, I understand that. Their real motive was as Chip says, to bury him. I mean, they make him part of the FBI, bury him, so he can't go. So the public never hears from him. But in terms of the paperwork that they're filing, that's not what they would say in their paperwork.
Yeah.
They provided no explanation why bringing in someone outside of Crossfire Hurricane was a good idea to get more information on the Crossfire Hurricane subject.
Yeah, that was nicely put. And then and then I guess the question Barr asked originally, just then what was the briefing upstream? I mean, who did they talk to about, who did Helson report to about this? Who did Otten report to? Who did Soma report to, in terms of, because in the whole
they did
outcome seemed, which is sort of what the mystery of this thing was, is how how it got buried.
They did a chain of command thing, so it's probably in the transcript. I know in the Otten they were talking about the chain of command. They went through it. So,
well, Helson talks about like his supervisor was telling him he had to do this, but
he was told to take on
Danchenko by a supervisor, which is somebody in the Washington field office, I would assume. But going on beyond that, the Barr thing is interesting because they're talking about how outing Danchenko was going to be a huge threat to national security, and Helson and Barr were like in a dispute about this. But like Barr, I mean, you talk about the National Security Division of the DOJ, which like should be like the head of, like they talk about, they're the head lawyers of national security for the government, whatever. But Barr knew everything they all knew, and Barr was fine with this being released. So like, if Barr was like, for me, like if Barr was like fine with like, oh, if like he's outed, like it doesn't freaking matter. It tells me that the other cases he was contributing to probably didn't matter either.
Okay, well, I mean, my mention of Barr was more that on the day after Horowitz pulled out, Barr said, once they got this information from the primary subsource, what the multiple irregularities, misstatements, and omissions by the FBI thereafter require an explanation, and Durham's going to provide that. And
correct. I just wanted to say that before I forgot about it, because like the whole thing was like Barr was like there was like this controversy between Barr and Helson, and I'm like I wanted to mention that before I forgot about it, but like Barr didn't seem like outing, like if there was a potential of Igor Danchenko being outed, he didn't seem that worried about it.
Oh, and I mean, I would say the argument in that case would be, on the one hand, you've got information that's being used to, in effect, try to take down the president. And Danchenko has massively exculpatory information on that, which was being concealed. And on the other hand, you've got Igor supposedly making invaluable contributions to national security by repeating gossip from Galkina and Vorontsov. And so if you're asked to make a trade-off between those two, I think Barr was sort of obviously say, well, overthrowing the president or trying to overthrow the president is more important consideration, and we'll forego these wonderful contributions from Kalkina and Vorontsov. I mean, that would be a reasonable.
Yeah, well, also like to the credit of Helson, at one point he said like, well, I didn't think that Danchenko was political because he was also providing intelligence that was supporting Trump, basically. Which I don't know what that is. Like, it seemed to me like that should be Ukraine stuff or something, but I don't know what that is.
What about that guy? What's his name? Like Greg Harvey that was CC'd in on the emails? That was really kind of perked up my ears. What was his name?
Greg Harley or something? Yeah.
I think he's with the Kupka Dolan crowd. He'll be with YPO or something.
Yeah, he's just like a GOP lobbyist.
Right. They're sprinkling GOP names as often as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. So he was with the YPO stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and none of the Dolan type material makes it into the ICA or the Crossfire predicate or the page 5s of stuff. So I mean, it's sort of in the chicken feed. You know, the dossier is a mixture of chicken feed and these wildly explosive allegations, and they're spending a lot of time on the chicken feed.
Yeah, for sure. That one of the things that the Dolan takeaway was that the special prosecutor definitely thought that maybe there was something there, that he was really actively feeding Danchenko things like the conspiracy that, you know, a lot of us thought about and talked about a lot of times, and some people still hold to. But and I think that's a good question that he needed to ask, and they did ask him. I think it became really clear that Dolan was not a bigger part of this and really generating, you know, the crazy allegations that ended up in the Steele dossier at all.
Could I go back to Danchenko a second? If they testified that part of his job, once becoming a CHS, was to verify the dossier, wouldn't first, that doesn't make sense, because step one in his process would be to filter out those things in the dossier that he knew to be exaggeration or things that he didn't tell to Steele.
Yeah, well, I mean, Helson kept on testifying. Like, they kept on asking him, like, could Danchenko provide any evidence that would corroborate the dossier? And he kept on saying, no, never happened. Not once.
And it sounded like that was the only thing he wouldn't provide them.
Yeah,
like, everything else he's given them, the sun, the moon, the stars, but anytime the Crossfire stuff came up, he's
just one little thing in the dossier would corroborate any of it.
Right.
Yeah, and he was also saying that Danchenko was consistently truthful. That's what Helson kept saying, and others, and he was referring to Dolan, Steele's motivations changed. That was what the defense kept harping on. You know, like he was saying, Dolan was saying he's friendly, but then he's dubious, and I don't know, Helson was too much.
Well, he was talking about, actually, Helson was going against Dolan, and he said he was talking about how that Dolan had dubious contacts with Russians. So Helson was basically shitting on Dolan a lot of the time.
Well, I guess, it sounds like Helson's brought into the sort of everybody's malign influence theory of things. So if Dolan's talking to a Russian, he's talking to a bad person.
Except for Danchenko.
Yeah, except for Igor.
He's
golden.
And did he ever get asked? Did Igor ever get asked how much of this dossier you cannot verify at all did you give to Steele? And explain that.
Well, Igor couldn't corroborate any of it.
I know. Did somebody say, well, how much of it is yours? Is your work product?
That's 80%.
He said 80% of the collected whatever, and 50% of the analysis. That's on the record. Yeah. So when we say Igor Danchenko created 80% of the dossier, that's out of his lips.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so,
but that, I mean, the trouble with that is that the structure is so varied, so that, for example, there are multiple sort of chicken feed reports where some Peskov is supposedly thinking something, or very inside baseball to Russia, and the the whole the public the impact of it was from reports 80, 95, 94, and everything else, other than that, the effort trying to verify the other stuff is not necessarily informative on the wild accusations in those three reports. And we don't know, and Igor seemed to more or less distance himself from sort of from most of those allegations in those reports.
Yeah, 95 was very central to the trial, like all day.
Let me jump in and back to the ship again. Let me ask a question, because I saw this was in Technofog's Substack today. He said that, and I don't know if this is directly from Auten, but I guess Auten's the only one that testified, so it had to come in. That Auten testified that in the 3-day January interview, he and Soma were not interested in doing an in-depth review of the Steele dossier allegations. Now, to me, that was exactly what I thought was the case. They weren't interested in having Danchenko blow up the dossier. As I said over and over again, that's not the way intelligence works. All they were interested in was knowing, did Steele lie to the FBI? Or is the dossier at least an accurate representation by Steele of what Steele was told? Meaning Steele might have been wrong, but all he did was accurately pass along inaccurate information.
No, but they didn't ask. But I've read that carefully, and they never asked what Danchenko told Steele, and they never asked Danchenko whether Steele had accurately. I mean, that was kind of left in a state where, in fact, Danchenko walked away from many of the allegations in the dossier, and then the FBI sort of hypothesized that the fairy godmother told Steele that there's some magic other source for these claims. It never occurred to them that they were untrue or made up.
Well, I guess I'm asking the wrong question. To you guys were in the courtroom today. You didn't see Auten's testimony, or did you? I guess no. Regina saw Auten's testimony.
Regina,
right?
Yeah, Regina did.
Regina did. Do you remember Auten saying something along the lines of what Technofog represented, that he and Soma were not interested in doing an in-depth interview?
I read the transcript. You're 100% right about that. He said that.
Yeah, see, and so that's, I think this kind of addresses this question of how much did they drill down on the specifics of what Danchenko knew or didn't know. They didn't want to. Well, all they really wanted to know is, was Steele accurate? Not was Steele truthful? Not was
okay. The first leg of what you're saying is, it certainly sounds right. The second leg of what you're saying is, I don't agree. I don't think is supported. We don't know. Whatever they were doing, there's no evidence that they were trying to find out what Steele said was accurate, because there's
no. That's exactly what they're doing. Because if they were told, no, Steele lied to you, that's not what I told Steele, they would have had to go to the FISA court. They would have had to go to the FISA court and said, we know that this guy lied to us. Just because he was inaccurate, if he's not lying, they don't have to take that to the FISA court, and the wire could stay up.
It's hard to okay. I think you're reading too much.
No, this is how intelligence work gets done. This is how intelligence work gets done. They will, if Steele lied to them, they would have to tell the court that, and they would have to pull down Steele's information. But if Steele simply just provided them information that turned out to be inaccurate, but Steele thought it was accurate when he provided to them, they don't have to take it down over that.
The big thing that Durham kept saying the first day over and over, really, really like pressed the point, was if they only knew, if Danchenko only told them the truth, then the FBI would have been obligated to have told the FISA courts the truth. I mean, that's what he just going on. And he was like, they spied on an American citizen because of these FISAs, because of the lies that Danchenko told to the FBI that were duped. That just was like what Durham said the first day.
Yeah, no question. And Danchenko is the bad actor in that sense, according to the FBI. And that's the point that Soma and Auten were getting at, is Steele's not the bad actor here. Steele passed on information that was inaccurate, but Steele didn't know it was inaccurate. So if Steele's not the bad actor, they don't have to report that to the FISA court. They didn't represent Danchenko to the FISA court. They didn't know who he was. So they didn't represent Danchenko as being credible in October 20th of 2017 or 2016 when they got the warrant. They didn't know that Danchenko was involved. So they made no representation about Danchenko.
Did they say Russian-based subsource in the warrant, in the October one?
But they didn't know who it was. They didn't discover his identity until December.
They knew it. They knew it in the last two renewals.
But that's
December.
Right. In the last two renewals, Danchenko was a source.
Correct. And they have said that by that point they should not have sought the April or June renewals. The FBI said that. But the interview of
they weren't paying a whole lot of attention of being sort of candid with the FISA court anyway, or with anybody else, because they kept on describing Danchenko as a Russian-based subsource multiple times after they knew he was in Northern Virginia. But Chip, actually,
they've already admitted that was a mistake. They've already admitted that. I'm telling you, this is an artful game. It is done intentionally and it's done artfully. There is attention paid to these kinds of differentiations.
Hey, Chip,
they weren't being candid with the court, though. In the October meeting, they said they asked Steele if they wanted to pay him $1 million to corroborate any of it, and he said he couldn't.
But that doesn't mean that they knew that what he said was false.
He didn't. Let me jump in real quick.
Hold on,
real quick.
They also didn't ask him if he was actually the source of the September Isikoff article either.
Exactly. They didn't ask him that until after they already had the wire.
I don't even think they ever asked him. They did, yeah. And then they fired.
They did, and that's when they fired.
Well, you also have Pianka out there who knew in October that Sergei Milyan was under a counterintelligence investigation, and then in December he finally met with Bruce Orr, and Bruce Orr told him that he had gotten information from Glenn Simpson that Sergei Milyan was the primary subsource, and Pianka knew both of those pieces, and they still didn't disclose that to the FISA court just a couple weeks later. So they absolutely didn't meet their obligations to the FISA court.
But when you meet in Rome, when you go to Rome and you meet with him and you go, hey, we'll give you $1 million to corroborate any of this. And he goes, I can't, and I'm not taking your $1 million. And then you still go to the FISA court and say, oh, yeah, this is real.
Hey,
isn't that? But they took him to the FISA court,
and not just the FISA court. I mean, they did it to the top DOJ management, to the congressional leadership, to the entire public. I mean, they lied to everybody.
Well, exactly. Here's I think a great example of what Ship is trying to say. The July 2018 talking points to one of the Senate committees. I believe it's the Intelligence Committee. They give a briefing about the primary subsource, and in their talking points that were released, they say, how have discussions with the primary subsource affected the FBI's understanding or competence in the Steele dossier? And they respond, at a minimum, our discussions with Danchenko confirm that the dossier was not fabricated by Steele. Our discussions with Danchenko confirm that he operates with high-level academic and government circles, maintains trusted relationships with individuals capable of reporting on the material he collected for Steele, and that Steele and Danchenko utilized reasonably sound intelligence tradecraft. And I think that's where what Shipp is trying to say is all they wanted to do is make sure that Steele was not making things up out of his ass. They said, hey, we have enough here to say Steele may have some sort of basis for this, so he's not actually fabricating something. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, and then you marry that with his background.
Exactly.
And you say we don't have a basis to believe he's fabricating any of this out of whole cloth. And oh, by the way, he is a 30-year veteran of MI6 with a specialty in Russia.
But he's also a guy who's getting paid by Oleg Deripaska.
That's never going to make it into a FISA war.
I mean, in the context of what's happening before Steele, I can actually give the FBI and the entire U.S. intelligence community a break after how they missed Aldrich James, how they missed Robert Hansen, and how they're all freaked out about the Russians, and how they're all really happy to catch Anna Chapman and all of those Russians. But if we're talking about going into counterintelligence at this point, and they missed Aldrich James and they missed Robert Hansen, I don't get it. I don't get it.
That goes back to the point I've made over and over, Lee, which is don't underestimate incompetence. Don't just never underestimate. These are not,
But you shouldn't be incompetent. After that shit happens. But
well, you move people around.
These are guys who got people killed. So I mean, look, I agree that there are people who are incompetent. But if you're saying that there are people who are on the top who are so bad about managing our counterintelligence capabilities, I'm like, well, there is no possible rational justification for continuing an organization like this that got people killed because they couldn't recognize that their counterintelligence was bad, and then if they got fooled because they're incompetent and well, whatever, then they wound up spying on a presidential campaign. I don't know. So can we write this entire thing off as like, well, they're just really bad at what they do. They're just so bad at what they do. That's the only way to understand it. They're just terrible. They got people killed throughout the 80s and the 90s. And then how they repaired what they messed up was they wound up spying on a presidential campaign and then the president.
It's worse because we found out today that it continues till today.
Yeah.
That's what we found out today. It's escalated in a sense.
And people were still asking last month if they can still get Igor Danchenko's intelligence. Last month, when they knew Igor Danchenko was indicted.
At what point do we say, wait a second, this is at this point, it can no longer be incompetence? Right?
No, here's my response.
It can't continue to be incompetence at this point.
Here's my response to that.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of voices for a long time who've questioned the wisdom of having a foreign intelligence surveillance corps, of even having that vehicle and giving that authority to a domestic intelligence agency. Yeah. There are a lot of people that have questioned the Patriot Act, because of the surveillance capabilities it gives to an agency that has a streak of incompetence in it. Don't lose track of the fact that the most senior FBI agents with, 18, 20 years experience, not necessarily, way up in management, they're making $150,000. If they were extraordinary talents and intellects, they wouldn't be where they're at. They would be out in private industry somewhere making multiples of that. This is not the most
I don't know.
brilliant workforce.
No,
Ship,
incompetence is,
I
the
understand what you're
incompetence needs to
saying.
be, but in this case, unlike say the curveball WMD thing, there was a commission, there was a post audit of the WMD intelligence failure. There was a diagnosis of it by 2005. There was a good report on diagnosing how the mistakes were made. And here we are 6 years after the Russiagate hoax fiasco, and the incompetence remains sort of unexposed.
Ship, come
Yeah, they're
on.
still
Look.
trying to get
you've
intelligence
got
from
the
Igor.
you've got the great
They're still
point there
trying to do it.
that Lee,
Ship,
you're making, and that Steven's making as well. Of this, there's so many people out there that are saying this whole agency needs to be remade, and we've heard.
I think it needs to be folded up. That's it.
Because
what Ship was saying when he was talking about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, everyone wants to talk about, we need another church committee. Like, no, church committee produced FISA. That's the last thing we want. We want no reforms. But what I want to ask Ship is like, look, if a beat cop pulled this stuff, he'd lose his job. They wouldn't say, it's not getting a big enough salary. They're like, come on, man. I mean, you don't have enough sense. You don't have enough sense to see
Well,
that.
hold on.
You've got the whole MAGA.
I think just about everybody with an active role in the decision making has lost their job or been significantly disciplined. Now, what the masses want is some criminal prosecution.
That's not true. Odd was still there.
He's been disciplined. He's appealing it. Oughton is a civil servant. He's protected by civil service. The agents and analysts are different in their work classification. He has what the hell is that? The civilian agency that you go through as a federal employee if you get fired. AUSAs are not. AUSAs are essentially work at the will of the U.S. attorney. He can just simply call you in one day and say, I don't want you to work here anymore, and send you on your way. But Oughton, as an analyst, has civil service protection rights.
Okay, well, the intel analysts have been amongst the worst offenders in this whole fiasco. They've mostly fallen under the radar because their names are redacted everywhere. We don't know who they are. And while Oughton seems like about the biggest dope in the world, I think you could also assume that the next guy up is going to be just as bad or worse, and that he's representing a whole department of
you need to sort
fools, and that Igor Danchenko must have seemed like he was sort of an all-seeing Solomon in comparison to these guys.
Well, let's back up a little bit. I'm going to give you a 2-minute history on the analyst position in the FBI. It didn't really exist as a professional class of employees until post 9/11. Analysts were worker bees. They were worker bees tasked by the agents to do certain specific chores and then report back to the agents the results of their work. Mueller, post 9/11, and remember the whole connect the dots, we're never going to get surprised again. We're going to be an analytical agency. We're going to drill down on our data sets so that we don't miss anything. He elevated the analyst ranks to a professional class.
And so now you've got 10,000 analysts, all of whom 90% of whom probably display their pronouns.
Exactly. And it is the analyst class.
But the post 9/11 stuff. The post 9/11 stuff is exactly the point. It's like, wait, so the 9/11 stuff, you can actually, it's amazing. You can actually point to bad police work. It's like, let me get this straight. So 2 of the 9/11 hijackers were actually boarding with an FBI confidential informant, but they didn't get that. Oh, but guys, I'll tell you what the real problem is. There was the firewall between the FBI and the CIA. If a New York City a police officer, a beat cop, missed something like that, he had a source, he'd lose his job and he'd have his ass handed to him. 3,000 people dead in the United States, and he wasn't in touch with an informant.
there was a firewall between counterintelligence and criminal in the FBI.
Right, I know.
Not
right.
between the CIA and the FBI. Inside the FBI, there was a firewall that information could not be passed from one side to the other. That's the famous Jamie Gorelick grandstand in the 9/11 Commission. Tear down that firewall. Let CI share information with the criminal side so that we didn't miss these data points. So that's the creation of this analyst, this professional analyst class. It is a huge issue inside the Bureau because agents feel like they were sidelined and had this professional analyst class sitting at their computer screens.
I just want to. I want to get one thing straight. That the fact that these agents had a confidential human source, a confidential informant, however we want to describe it, who was renting to two of the 9/11 hijackers. To me, this is the fundamental issue. It's not about firewalls. It's about fundamental police work. It's not about counterintelligence. It's not about criminal investigators. Like, wait a second, who's living with you? I'm sorry, who do you got living with you? I just want. I don't get this.
Well, I'll tell you what you don't get, Lee, is that information was never conveyed by the source to the Bureau. The Bureau can't read the source's mind. They can't read the source's mind. If the source doesn't offer it up, they're not going to know it.
Whose responsibility is that? Is it not the FBI agents?
What do you want? Electrodes? You want electrodes on the source's nuts to get the information from him when they don't even know he has it?
How about just going around and ask, what are these sources getting paid for? What are they doing? Can't you stop by hey guys, I owe you a falafel. Let's have a chat over a falafel. What's going on?
My uncle in Yemen had lunch with a lieutenant colonel, and that's the information you get.
And okay, that's very interesting, and thank you. But who is this guy with the enormous fucking beard who's walking out of your house?
Why would they know that?
With a surfboard.
Why would they know that? Why would they know that a guy with an enormous beard was living in his house?
What does
police They don't surveil their sources.
I'm not a policeman. I have no idea. But tell me then what police work looks like.
They don't surveil their sources. They rely on the sources to give them information. If the source fails them, which is what happened in that case, the source did not report that information.
Then isn't that the fundamental issue? The fundamental issue is not about a firewall. The fundamental issue is not about different people in the IC sharing information. And we need a DHS now. We need a DNI. We need to make everything so much bigger. Isn't that
and has it worked?
This was the fundamental. It has not worked. That's what I'm saying. It's not worked.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. But my point is, these are probably problems without ready solutions.
But wait a second. You say that these guys are not that. And look, I entirely respect the work that law enforcement does. But is it really a matter of intellect, or is it a matter of being out there and saying well, guys, what's going on? What's happening? I mean, I don't know. I've never worked any of these jobs. I have no idea. But what is it? What is it that people should know when they're getting out there? Because I can't believe it's just about FISA. It's about spying on U.S. citizens. I have to believe that there's a certain amount of it that's just common sense. I go around, Ship, maybe it's the same with you. I don't know. Maybe it's the same with some of you other folks. I go around to different audiences, and we all talk about Russiagate. And people at a certain point, there's always some guy or some woman in the audience who looks at me like, you're an idiot. I'm like, what do you mean? You spent all your time trying to explain this thing, and it's so simple. What happened? It's just a bunch of dirty cops and dirty politicians, and they just spied on their opponents and they framed them. That's it. I'm like, you're right.
You know what? Hey, wait. You are right. This started because there was a coterie of senior FBI officials who thought the idea of having Donald Trump as president was simply unimaginable. And then, oh my God, Donald Trump might be a Russian agent. That would be the worst thing imaginable. We cannot let that happen. It's like, and I made this point on Twitter a couple days ago. I didn't artfully frame it very well. It's like, my point was, so what? What if Donald Trump got elected and he wanted friendlier relations with Russia? It would have been the FBI's job to execute that policy, because the FBI doesn't make policy.
No,
It's
very
not
good
the
point.
FBI's.
Very interesting point. Right.
It's not their job to say it would be a bad idea for Donald Trump to be president and have friendlier relations with Russia. That's not their job.
Right.
If they didn't want to do that, they could quit.
Yeah.
So that was the
President makes
problem.
foreign policy. Yeah.
That was the problem, that there was this group of senior FBI officials led by Jim Comey who couldn't imagine a Donald Trump presidency that might want to have a cozier relationship with Russia. That
Was
just
the
could
issue
not
that
be allowed to happen.
Was the issue they couldn't imagine a Trump presidency, and they added the Russia stuff on?
Weissman
They
was just
rationalized it with Russia.
Well, Ship, to go along with like Lee's point, like with CHSs, like I mean, maybe the electrodes on the nuts might be a little bit too far, but like going to the health and like thing, it's like why can't you just freaking polygraph every single CHS?
Well, because if your CHS then fails the polygraph, you got to shut them down, and then you don't have that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Again, we're back to not really.
And then they can go and bomb and stuff if they want to, but at least they're not our CHSs bombing stuff.
No.
I do.
Cool. Before you shut them down, then you put the electrodes on their nuts. How's that?
Good point.
Shut them down. Yeah,
good point.
Well,
if they fail the polygraph, put the electrodes on.
I do have a question, guys.
I got to say it. Even when I disagree, I so enjoy these kinds of debates, because these are the kinds of debates that the population needs to engage in for better decision making to be made.
Does anybody know? Just since you're talking about 9/11, do you know what Comey was doing in the 6 months? In the first 6 months of 2001.
Comey was prosecuting Khobar Towers case out of the Eastern District of Virginia.
Well, he was bringing an indictment. He was investigating it, and I mean, it had a backstory because the primary candidate for that was Al Qaeda, and Mueller, when he as acting deputy attorney general, transferred the case from Washington field office, which to East District, where Comey was, and then Comey pinned it on something called Saudi Hezbollah, which probably doesn't, which seemed to exist mostly in the minds of Saudi torturers, and so they had their eye squarely on Saudi Hezbollah in the first part of 2001, while Al Qaeda was instead of Al Qaeda, who seemed to have been the more logical suspect for Khobar Towers, and weren't paying as much attention to Al Qaeda as they might have. And that was kind of the first engagement between Mueller and Comey was on that Khobar was Mueller greasing the wheels for Comey to get in charge of the Khobar Towers investigation, so that it would, so he would indict Saudi Hezbollah rather than Al Qaeda.
I can't really remember why Comey came to, because Comey was not he wasn't like some Ivy League high flyer. I can't remember exactly how it was that Comey kind of came to the forefront, and rode, because off of Khobar Towers prosecutions, he was then made the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, even though he had no connection to New York, by George Bush, and then later became the Deputy Attorney General, and then was out of the government.
Well, you were AUSA in New York before, right?
I don't think so.
I think an SDNY under Rudy. At least Dawson tells me it every single day. That's the only reason I know that.
Well, he's originally from New Jersey. I know that, but I don't think I could be wrong. Maybe
he would make USA under Rudy unless Dawson's lying to me, which I don't think he would ever do that. I feel like he's right on that point.
Yeah, I don't know his biography that well. I was 6 years in the department at that point, and it was the Clinton administration that was occupying all the positions of power.
Hey guys, I have a couple of points I wanted to jump in for Dad for discussion. So first off, I think Technical Fog kind of pointed out, as some of the guys did earlier. I mean, Danchenko, 3 years as a CHS, he was paid $200,000. And, of course, he was offered a big compensation package when we outed him. But $200,000 for 3 years of work. I mean, this was like a full-time job for him. And especially like the last year, after Horowitz released this report, I mean, he was still being well paid. And I mean, one of the open questions that'll come out of this is how substantive were these investigations and these leads that Danchenko was providing? I mean, MB testified earlier that, one of the agents said today that at least half of it was open source. So we basically paid Danchenko $80,000 a year to Google stuff and then like make up some stuff.
Yeah, nobody pays us to do that, by the way.
Yeah. Like, how do we get in on that program?
He would. Those payments are generally just made monthly. He's an ongoing source. He's going to get source payments on a monthly basis. That what's the agent's name? Helson. Helson is going to put in a request for payment on a monthly basis, on the basis that he's essentially working every day. And that Helson's working with him every day, and that he's providing intelligence, and Helson is running down the intelligence and pushing it out to other agencies. That's sort of Helson's job, is to filter what Danchenko sends him, and that's what he's paying Danchenko for. And as long as the SAC and WFO believes that the information is valid and useful and is being productive, he's going to keep authorizing the payments.
It's cash too. We heard that today.
Yeah, cash payments, and he's also making that sweet Dan Jones money too.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, there's also like the other point I wanted to raise is that I heard from somebody today that typically there's like $100,000 cap on payments to a CHS. So when they offered Steele $1 million, that would need special approval. Like that's probably director level approval to go ahead and offer him $1 million to do something like that. So I would
guess that didn't go beyond McCabe. I would guess that was pushed up by pre-staff or by probably by Strzok to McCabe, and McCabe said yes, and he wouldn't have taken that to Comey. McCabe could do it on himself.
Well, I think that feeds into the conversation of how much the top level leadership knew, and obviously if they had to approve that offer of $1 million, they were read into a great deal to the Steele dossier reports, and that was back in October. And then fast forward, 6 months, and we posed this question, I think, in the last Spaces chat, where Danchenko finally became a paid CHS in March, 2 months subsequent to his first January interview, and that had to also probably come at the director level or maybe the deputy director. But like the illusion out there, and I think it's an illusion, that the FBI leadership couldn't have possibly known of what's in this January Danchenko interview. I think that's wrong. I mean, I
absolutely agree. That's wrong. They knew. They knew. There may not be any documentation that they knew.
Yep.
But again, that's the kind of thing that's going to get pushed to Strzok. And you remember pre-staff said he was uncomfortable with the way Strzok could go around him directly to McCabe. Pre-staff didn't like that. In fact, there was one more person who's sort of been completely Teflon here. His name has never come up. That was between pre-staff and McCabe, but Strzok was able to in-run both of them directly to McCabe with information.
Well, so Crossfire Hurricane receives the reports September 19th, and then sometime in between October 3rd and September 19th, they're like, "Oh, let's give him $1 million."
If he can show them that corroboration of this stuff beyond simply his own report and his anonymous sourcing, they'd give him $1 million.
Yeah, so that was in a 2-week period that was approved by somebody.
They wanted it, and that tells you how fast they wanted to act.
Yep.
That was all about speed. Because what's happening? What's happening 8 weeks after that? Or no, 4 weeks after that? An election. Donald Trump's going to be running for president 4 weeks later.
That should be the red flag too.
Hillary Clinton's a wounded candidate.
So that should be the red flag too, because as soon as you start looking into this,
Why didn't he take the mission?
Who?
Steele.
Because I think Steele wasn't interested. I said this today on Twitter. He wasn't interested in proving the allegations. He was only interested in getting the allegations published widely so that Donald Trump would lose the election. Steele had no interest in proving that Donald Trump was a Russian asset. He was only interested in Donald Trump losing.
Well, if he took $1 million to actually out his entire source network, he was probably thinking that this source network, I'm just going to make millions and millions on for the next whatever years, potentially.
Well, it couldn't prove anything. It wasn't an option.
Yeah,
because he couldn't.
That as well.
Well, somebody's got to raise the point of credulity in that, Steele was producing these dossier reports within weeks of being contracted. I think his first dossier report was authored literally a week after he was engaged by Fusion GPS. So the idea that, he couldn't corroborate it with months and months of time and $1 million payment out there, that should have been another red flag. And it's not like we don't have enough of those already, but if he could corroborate this within a week to write the dossier report,
they didn't
why can he?
So why wasn't
I mean, here's the other thing.
Why wasn't
Steele
it a red flag for them?
Here's the other thing.
Exactly.
Steele wouldn't tell the FBI any of his sources. Then he went to the State Department 8 days later and told him that Trubnikov and Surkov were his sources.
Mm-hmm.
What is that all about?
That's what I mean. Why didn't he take the money?
Yeah. Because he could have accepted $1 million for Trubnikov and Surkov are my sources for $1 million, and then he went to the State Department, didn't accept anything.
Yeah, but the money wasn't take this $1 million and then tell us. The money was, we will give you $1 million if you corroborate. It wasn't here, take the check from us and then go do the work. It was, give us what we need and we will pay you $1 million for that information. But he didn't have the information to give.
So here's the follow-up question, right? Because if Steele's
why did they think he did? Why did they think that Steele might have access to this information?
I think it was because of who he was and his history with MI6 as a Russian specialist. They expected that he had a source network.
But we know from what Priestap and others spoke with the MI6 guys that Steele wasn't as high level as MI6 as he was presented to the press. I think there are reasons the FBI thought he was capable of putting together a different a dossier to say that he could confirm it. I think it's garbage, but I think they thought that he was possible of coming up with this material. That's where I think this is going. That's what could happen.
If it's just a put up or shut up kind of maneuver, that actually makes some sense. What do you got to lose? If you can prove that Donald Trump is, colluding with the Russians, it's easily worth $1 million to our government, to our country. And if you can't, then fuck you. Get the fuck out of here. So
yeah, but
I kind of get that.
Wait a second. But that was clearly not their case, because if the case was, if you can't prove it, get the fuck out of here, that should
have been the message to begin with.
Right, but it wasn't, because they got a warrant to spy on a presidential campaign.
But they didn't pay $1 million to Christopher Steele either.
All right, but it's wait, so put up or shut up, and if you don't, we're still going to get a warrant to spy on a presidential campaign.
Right.
I mean,
true.
it doesn't. I mean, look, I as you all may be able to tell,
they didn't take the negative of that. They didn't take the negative and said, you didn't put up, and we still went with it.
Yeah.
I think here's what would have been the difference.
Starting from the premise, the FBI was not fooled ever, right? I will accept the idea that there are a lot of dingbats there, but I cannot accept that we have an entire American law enforcement agency that is this abjectly stupid. That I cannot accept.
No, let me tell you the two distinctions, though. If he puts up the $1 million, if he takes the $1 million and he says, "Here's my source network," call them. They'll verify all this information as being true. That would have come out right into the press before the election. Okay, the fact that he didn't do that, the FBI pulled back and said, "Okay, well, we'll get a FISA warrant," which they didn't go public with. Nobody knew about this until after the election. So the FBI They took the information in the dossier. They made use of it, but they made use of it in a way that was not public. They made use of it in a way that did not influence the election, except when Harry Reid sent his letter, published his letter to Comey. They kept it under wraps. Now, was that the right thing to do? I don't think so. I think, it was clearly motivated by political animus at the top of the FBI to even pursue it at all. But had they gotten the confirmation and paid the $1 million, they would have went public with that.
Well, see, I think that's sort of like the illuminating question would be to Igor Danchenko, because if Steele thought this sourcing was legitimate, the conversation probably would have went something like, hey, Igor Danchenko, if you can go and verify and get me all the sourcing on this information, I'll give you $50,000. And then another week or two would have went by, and Steele would have said something like, hey, Igor, if you can verify this, I'll give you $100,000. And then another month would have went by, and he would have said, hey, Igor Danchenko, give me your sourcing network, and I'll give you $200,000. I mean, because if there's $1 million out there, and if Steele has any idea that this is legitimate, he's going to task his employee to start handing over his source network, or to start producing that information that he can actually provide to put this under lock and key.
And I think Steele always knew there was a level of dubiousness to the reporting. He was more interested in just getting Trump beat. He was interested in the allegations becoming public, not that the allegations were true.
Yeah, and Lee, just to finish that thought, the FBI can't be corrupt and stupid. I mean, those are not mutually exclusive.
Oh, absolutely, no question. There were clear political motivations at work here among several people with decision-making authority.
Look, I absolutely, they can be corrupt and stupid, but I think we're leaning a little too far over on the side to say that they're dumb.
No, I think it's true, but also, I mean, I'm not trying to defend the FBI, but they're not a Borg. Like, there's an institution here with different individual players, and they're all making different decisions. Some more corrupt than others. Like, Kleinsmith was making decisions that were clearly corrupt, and he was, lying and cheating and doing it for his own benefit. Is that the same thing as Helson? We don't know what's in his heart or what he was doing, but institutionally, they are corrupt because there are too many corrupt players in it, and it doesn't seem to be correctable. So if we want to talk about what needs to happen, it really goes back to this thing needs to be burned down to the ground and rebuilt in some other form, and probably separating this intelligence, this domestic surveillance, counterintelligence into either something else or maybe going away completely. But I don't know what other option there is, because what this is not correctable. I don't know if that can be talked out of that.
No, I think that, and that's been a talking point for a long time. Is should the FBI's, criminal operation and their counterintelligence operation be cleaved into two different agencies, with different charters and different command structures and different reporting structures and different regulations.
Why do we need? Yeah, I mean, I guess what are the actual things that the FBI is supposed to do? That look, I mean, one of the important things the FBI is supposed to do, they can't do, which is not any fault of their own. I'll give them a break, right? They can't manage 300,000 Chinese student visa holders, right? That's a political issue, so they can't manage that. But I mean, what are the things that they are supposed to handle that we need to have handled? I mean, the China issue is important, but that's fundamentally political. It's not law. It's not counterintelligence. It's not law enforcement. There is.
Oh no, it's counterintelligence. It's absolutely counterintelligence, and that's part of the problem. And if you create
no, I'm sorry. The students coming from the People's Republic of China have no inherent right to study in the United States. We do not have to have 300,000 Chinese student visa holders. We can limit it to 40. Right, and we don't need an FBI to manage that. We can have local police forces manage something like that, at least as well as the FBI has done it.
Well, yes, but okay. So this is sort of one of my hobby horses. If you think every one of those 300,000 students is not an intelligence asset for the Chinese intelligence agencies, you don't know why they're here. They all have an obligation to report to the embassies and the consulates what they see and hear. They are intelligence assets.
I agree.
So
That's what I'm saying. Why do we have 300,000 of them then?
no, I agree.
Right.
Well, we should not.
At the end of the day, you get the government you deserve.
Yeah. So, but when you have an open, when we have a society that welcomes foreigners, and I'm not talking about illegal, border crossers. I'm just talking about generally welcoming foreigners and having a place where people all over the world want to come to. You're going to have malign actors that get through. And if you're going to have malign actors that get through, you're going to need a domestic intelligence agency to try to monitor who that is.
It's fine to have French executives, right, who are 25 French executives in New York and and Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, but that's a different thing than 300,000, again, Chinese student visa holders. I think it's a very different thing. And I think that's settled politically. So once we eliminate some of if we can't, of course, it's very hard to eliminate these political issues.
Right.
But the FBI can't manage them anyway. Let's say we could eliminate these political issues, then what do we need the FBI to do in terms of counterintelligence?
That's the $64 question. And would that role be played better by a separate agency, an agency that resembles the CIA, but the CIA, is not operating U.S. So do you then where you have a domestic intelligence agency and a foreign agency and a law enforcement agency?
Hey guys, does SHIP sound like a transformer for everybody else?
That came in badly on this end.
Sorry,
no, but
sorry,
but
SHIP.
it was kind of
I muted you there. Got like Optimus Prime over there.
Well, look, I think it's going to be a hard case. I mean, SHIP, I think it's going to be a hard case to make to the American people. Now it's like, well, look at what DHS is doing and look at what DNI has done. So
DHS is a disaster. DHS is that's a Frankenstein's monster.
Absolutely. But if you're saying like, well, look, what we can do is we can basically break off the FBI in two different parts and make a much smaller domestic intelligence service. And the argument against it is precisely the argument that you've been making about Russiagate. It's like, well, these guys are kind of dumb. They're remarkably dumb. How do we get insanely brilliant people who are focusing? How do we get, like, say, like 25 people? How do we get Fool Nelson to run the domestic intelligence service in the United States to make sure that we're safe? And that fool, when he's not out playing ultimate frisbee, he's got all the great guys making sure that they're doing the ace job.
Well, let me give you an example.
I'll do it. I'm doing it right now, maybe.
Let me give you an example. If you have a mayor of a big city, and you make the salary for that mayorship $15,000, who's going to run? You're mostly going to get people who don't need a salary because they've been successful elsewhere in their life and they don't need the money. They're going to be talented individuals that come to run for that office. If you make the salary $500,000, who's going to run? People that, are worth $500,000. They're going to stand out among the crowd. When you make a salary for a mayor for $70,000, who's going to run? People who've got $70,000 jobs. People making $500,000 aren't going to run for a $70,000 job, and you're not going to elect somebody who's on public assistance. So if you really want a high functioning government workforce, you're going to have to pay for it.
Or we can just downsize the federal government because we don't need all these fucking idiots. I feel like the risk is worth the reward sometimes.
Here's another one of my hobby horses. Why is the government so damn big? Because Congress keeps passing so damn many laws and federalizing so much law enforcement.
Yeah, we don't need all that freaking pork.
Well, if you're conservative, which I think a lot of people philosophically in our end of things probably tend towards, that's a big deal. This is philosophically what we were supposed to believe, is that big government has these inherent problems. These are not solvable. This is not, you can't have an FBI with, 100,000 agents or whatever it is and have them all be top notch and be good and be solving all these problems for us. It just doesn't work. It's not possible. This is, you can't spend your way into it. Even if you paid them an insane amount of money, it wouldn't matter. These are problems that should be solved locally, should be solved, on a small scale as best they can, and something you have to live with maybe, and just say the alternative is worse.
Yeah, you have to live with some of these problems, and then like you're saying, get rid of some of these federal laws so you don't have people that have to enforce them.
Right.
Well, wait. When you say the alternative is worse, what's the alternative?
Exactly what we're seeing. This bureaucracy that is a government into itself that has taken control, and that apparently even the voters can't control, the president can't control, that's working against us. That's the worst case scenario. We have this Mandarin government that is really running things. So is that worse than the possibility of maybe there's some Russians sneaking around doing some nasty business? Or, I feel like they're
failing anyways. So they're failing what they're supposed to do anyways. They're supposed to be they're like, oh, we're gonna try to collect all of our data and stuff. Like, they're failing anyways. So
So
get rid of them. We're not even safer.
Right.
We're not safer with more federal government. So get rid of these fucks. So 100%.
I need to ask a question. This is Lynette. Ship, man, you have got me lit on fire here. You talk about the salaries and who, you're going to get a $70,000 a year worker. But you know what? Some of those $70,000 a year worker, and I'm just a citizen here listening into you guys. I think you'd be surprised what you would get. Because
my comment was, if you offered $70,000 to be mayor of LA.
Hear me out a minute. And you talk about, well, how do you hold these guys accountable? But I hear you use words like, I believe, and if it's true, then we got to trust it. If we trust our sources, no, you validate. I've been on the other side of dealing with the government. I've done reports for Medicare and Medicaid. We get one thing wrong, and we could get a corrective action plan from the government. And again, it takes months to get out from underneath it. One little data element in millions of records, we are held accountable. And you can't tell me that the government can't build those types of controls into their processes to do that. And that's where your private citizens can give great input. Government works in this bureaucracy that is inefficient and ineffective. And I think that if we could have citizens that could help step forward, hell, I'd volunteer. I'm retired. I'll volunteer. Who've worked in processes and organizations that is process driven. You can fix it. I'm just saying. I just needed to say that. Thanks for letting me say that.
No, I welcome your input, but my point about the $70,000 was for mayor of Los Angeles,
right?
Not just a government worker.
You could get a really good person, because I think I would be a really good person to do that, but it takes money to get there, and that's what holds that $70,000 a year person back from getting in. And unless you want to play games with the GOP or the Democrats, you're gonna have a really difficult time getting there, as the way the system is organized today.
I'm completely sympathetic with your point about holding the government holding private sector to standards that they wouldn't apply to themselves.
Absolutely,
and that's just reality.
And
the
that's
government
bullshit.
It's never going to impose the same kind of standards on its own performance that it expects from the private sector.
Absolutely.
That's a function of the fourth estate. That's a function of the federal bureaucracy.
I get it, but as a citizen, that's bullshit. Bullshit. I pay taxes. I expect them to do their work the same way I do my work, and I should not expect any different.
They do it on the lower levels, right? I mean, if we're looking at our armed services,
okay,
right? I mean, no. I'm saying that the government will the government will be hard on the on the armed services. Not certainly certainly not with flag officers, but no, they will hold people accountable. And so we have to ask why they will not hold people accountable in these different bureaucracies, but they will throw out servicemen who will not submit to a vaccine mandate.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think the money is not that significant, frankly. I think it's not just a function of money. And look, I mean, for the FBI, we're not looking to hire like Elon Musk's siblings, right? Like, how am I going to get as much as Elon Musk? I mean, there are different attractions to these jobs, like people who want to serve their country, people who want to protect their fellow citizens. And of course, that's why people have always respected the FBI and the Department of Justice ship. I mean, God bless you for serving us in that way. And I know that was your attraction to it. So I guess I'm asking, like, why is there this additional incentive now? Like, people know if they do well in the DOJ as a federal prosecutor, you can move on to private practice and do well and serve the people as you have. So why is there this huge incentive with money that's necessary with the FBI or the DOJ right now?
No, my point is I've seen enough across the spectrum of the federal workforce and federal law enforcement to realize that, you know, the not incompetence, but the less competent are easily recognizable. But they are given stuff to do every day, just like the exceptional. I mean, I've had some exceptional agents. Some guy, I had an FBI agent who was a CPA. I did a tax case, and he came to me one day and said, "How about if I just write out all the questions for you to ask me?" It's like, okay, it's a tax case, and he's the accountant. Yep. So yeah, there are brilliant people in the workforce, but there are not brilliant people as well, and the not brilliant people get work to do, and it doesn't turn out that well.
I understand. I just needed to speak my mind because I was about to explode here, and I was like, "What is he saying?" And again, I respect you guys. I really appreciate listening in to this Danchenko thing. And whatnot. I listen to some other sources as well, like Just Human, and that kind of give a different perspective. So it's really good to get both sides. So thanks.
Thank you.
That was an easy tax case, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that to do that.
So does this end with Fool as the director of the FBI? Because that would be a positive.
Are you guys back? Are you guys back? I mean,
have to get probably like 90 to 95% of the Senate Republican to get me confirmed.
Are you guys back in court tomorrow?
Yeah.
All right. So it's 1 a.m. So it's about time to go to bed, isn't it?
No, I think I'm probably going to handle direct against a couple of the FBI agents tomorrow. Durham probably is exhausted from that, so I might step in.
Just asking for his notebook.
Yeah,
the questions are written down.
By the way, you guys can check out Techno's article he just posted because he got the transcript and he has some of the good stuff that we were talking about. And the redirect.
Now, you mentioned earlier you might do another one of these tomorrow. You still got that in mind?
Yeah, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, probably. Why not?
I don't know when or where or in what condition we'll be, but I'm sure it'll happen.
Yeah.
So question for you guys who have been there and a question for Ship. So and you guys, forgive me, I came in late. You may have already spoken about this, but Durham was impressive and on fire earlier. And Ship, do you still think that we might be looking at a prosecutor who has been advised that he doesn't have a lot of room, and he is responding to this and trying to get as much out there as he can? So for both you guys, for all of you guys.
I certainly think so. It certainly has all the hallmarks. When it came out, I'm not sure where it was first reported that, this is the only other case he's going to file, that this is it. Then I think he is at this point concerned that, some of his issues with the FBI's performance and how they handled Crossfire Hurricane would be redacted as 6E material in a public report. And so some of it he's going to get out on the record in court best he can, and so that there is some public accounting that maybe a GOP Congress will take up.
That was the New York Times. So again, of course, we'd like to believe that information is accurate, but who knows, right? I think that's where that reporting was. So I guess and being fool. Has it been impressive? What's your guys' sense?
Yeah. So Lee, you should. I'll kind of review it again, but you should listen to this again because we covered it. I think we did a good job of covering what actually happened, but Durham, like when we got there, Durham was on the direct to Helston. He was kind of very,
collegial.
Yeah, collegial and Joe. He was very soft spoken sort of to him, and he kind of at that time, we went to lunch and he was like, yeah, Durham was kind of low energy there, but very nice guy, and in hindsight, it looked like he was lulling him into a false sense of security, and the defense propped up Danchenko, and Helston used Helston to prop him up as just as our intelligence agency's best Russian asset. And then immediately on the redirect, Durham just freaking fired up and just freaking smacked Helston.
As soon as that door got opened, it was on, and the demeanor, the physical demeanor of Durham changed.
And the voice and everything, he just freaking smacked him.
Yeah, it was impressive. It was really cool to see.
Yeah. It was like a movie. Seriously, it was the defense, he looks like they took it. And I'm like, I don't know if Durham has it. Maybe he's just a kind old grandfather guy. And then all of a sudden he just in there, he's freaking smacked them. And we're like, what? He's Techno has the transcript. You can read his article, and he's talking about this derogatory information, but he wasn't asking. He was freaking just
he was demanding.
in him.
Yeah, he was demanding. He's pointing a finger at him and just
And he's like, what about that counterintelligence investigation? And Helston was like, okay, what's going on here? And then
Helston was not prepared for that blow at all.
Yeah, because Durham just freaking stood on him.
So why do you guys think that? Well, so I'm going to ask this of all of you then, including Ship. Then why did Garland let Durham go on this long? And why did it let him go on this long? And why is he rolling it up now? Or why does he want to roll it up now?
I'll jump in and just say I don't think that they have as big of a stake in things with this administration as whatever happens to the Clintons and so forth is not necessarily their problem. So I think letting things ride was better than creating a political liability and maybe creating a firestorm that you're hiding things. So this can't really hurt us. We'll let it go a certain amount. That'd be my take.
Yeah, I think I said this earlier today on Twitter. At the end of the day, this is making a bunch of Bush era GOP political operatives look bad. Comey is a Republican. Ray is a Republican. Who else? There was one other one. I had three people. Mueller was a Republican.
Ray, you mentioned Ray as well, I think.
Yeah. So Ray, Mueller, and Comey are all Republican operatives. They were GOP appointees. So let those guys look bad. Big deal. So what? The Democrats don't care. But he shut down the grand jury because Garland couldn't know where that might go. We saw in the Sussman trial, there were a lot of tentacles still, wrapped around the Clinton campaign and Clinton political operatives. And that was a risk I think that Garland wasn't willing to let continue to operate in a way that he couldn't, strictly monitor.
But there's also two grand juries. So, they say a grand jury was shut down. We don't know which one it was.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So there might still be one that's open?
We don't really know. This is all based off of
New York Times.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Wall Street Journal. I think on that one of what Joffe's lawyer was saying and stuff like that. It could be true, definitely. But I don't know. It seems like it's more like one of those things where this investigation, a lot of it has been delegated. It seems like a lot of it has been delegated to the FBI's inspection division. And I don't know who did that exactly, but it could be one of those things where it's we're farming out all your investigation to other people, Durham, and you can get lost. Because, like, I mean, what's his name? A couple of the FBI agents in the Sussman trial were like, yeah, we're being investigated by the inspection division or whatever. So it could be all farmed out, and Durham, Garland could be like, why do I need you? We can investigate it in other ways.
I think that's a very, very likely situation. I think you're exactly right. That Garland and Lisa Monaco have looked at this and said, okay, let's assume there's malfeasance among certain FBI officials. Why do we need a special prosecutor for that? We FBI officials get investigated and disciplined, and in some instances prosecuted across the country all the time. We have a process for that. We can do it here.
Yeah. And we know it's true because we know the inspection division is actually looking at these guys. So why would the special counsel be necessary for Jaffe and all these other people? Like, why would that even be necessary? So for me, I'm like, Mueller farmed out a bunch of his stuff. Like, why wouldn't they do the exact same? And it would be completely on the up and up, I would say. I mean, maybe not on the up and up, but it's on the. It'll check out. It'll check out in theory.
Has there been a lot of press there?
The gallery was probably, I don't know, 80% press, and then 10% us, and then 10% whoever else. But it wasn't a big gallery. There were maybe 40, 50 people.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. You guys are doing great. I mean, as always. I mean, thanks. You guys are just doing fantastic work.
Oh, absolutely. It's been fun. Thanks.
You guys should stick around till Monday and wander across the river and go watch a Day of the Oath Keepers. That's a circus.
Oh man, I would love to.
Are you there, Ship? Are you?
No, I'm actually in the second case. We supposed to start November 29th, but I've been working pretty closely with all those guys in the first case. I'm in kind of communication with all of them every day.
I can't believe you ducked out early, Ship. You would have had a great time.
I know.
I had a sentencing there tomorrow, and I put it off.
Oh my!
Or I would have been there this week, but you know what? When I put it off, I didn't realize the Danchenko case was this week, or I might not have done it.
Yeah. Well, I wish I was still in DC. If I were, I'd be getting all of you guys at least a half a glass of beer or something like that.
That wouldn't last long.
That's why. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I could get home earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, it's great. I really wish I'd love to get to meet all you guys. I'm sure we will all meet at some point.
Oh yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll definitely do it one day.
We're gonna have a big Russiagate conference at some point.
Yeah, the conference once it's over, if it ever ends.
We need an annual convention like the Band of Brothers.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant idea. I love it. That would be sick. Yeah, we need to get Russiagate Con or Spygate Con going. Once it's over, it's gonna be great.
Okay, guys, I'm down to like 3% on my phone, so I'm going to sign off, and hopefully we'll have something like this tomorrow. I got a appellate brief I got to finish though, so I got to attend to that.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Ship.
Just before you go, Ship, just want to say that you have a January 6th fundraiser or Give Send Go on your Twitter that people might
appreciate you mentioning that.
And the other thing is, like, the guy who's hosting this, Undead Boyer, if you look in the Crucible, the tweet above, so, like, was it yesterday when Durham said, oh, we found out about Danchenko in fall of 2020, but we knew about it in July 2020.
Well, the transcript actually said the public found out about it.
Okay,
so
right, okay, but the same people working on like working out who Danchenko was in July are doing like sterling work, especially Undead for you or Unrequited for you. So if you look at the top, the tweet posted in the space, you'll
Right.
see a give, send, go link. We're doing more for you. And that's
Okay.
it, really.
Yeah, contribute to
That's
all
great.
those guys for sure.
Yeah,
Hey,
cheers.
I'll say one January 6th thing as well. Matthew Perna, the January 6th defendant who took his own life several months ago. His aunt, his family organized a run for him up in his hometown, his area in Pennsylvania, and so there were lots of protests. This was delayed, but I believe they're going to be having it on Saturday. So I mean, I don't know if any of you all are in that in that area. You should definitely go. But if not, whatever, tweet about it. I'll try to send out some social media tomorrow. And but yeah, I mean, he's a man. What a sad story. What a terrible story. And he just seems like a sweet guy. And his aunt Jerry Perna is like a wonderful person. So yeah, just another another guy who was fighting. So
He's a casualty. I actually spoke with his lawyer not long after he took his life, so I kind of got all of the details that led up to that. And he's a casualty. I think that's the accurate way to describe him. And it's a tragedy the way that played out.
Sure.
All right, well, thank you guys for hosting this. This is great, and thank you so much. What a huge honor and great fun.
Yep, I'll check in with everybody later.
Yep, thanks for coming on, Lee and Ship. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys for sure. And I think I'm going to go ahead and end the chat here, guys.
No, Penguin, you're not allowed.
You guys got to wake up in like 5 hours, you know.
Oh,
We don't sleep. We're gonna go out and do vigilante things tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the chat here, and hopefully, we're gonna probably do one tomorrow. Happy to host that, and nobody else wants to, so I'm sure we'll speak again soon, and I really look forward to hearing more from MB and Fool. I mean, it was just great to have you guys there. Obviously, it just, there's so much that you can't pick up in the transcript. So I really appreciate you guys being generous with your time and coming on the chat tonight and giving us the play-by-play. I thought that was great.
Yeah, like you could unless you were there, you just by the transcript, you couldn't understand the energy. It was freaking awesome, and yeah, it was sweet.
Yeah, very cool.
And yeah, if somebody just came in late, you should listen to the play-by-play of how it actually went down, because that's actually how it went down.
It was dramatic. It was like a movie. I'm not exaggerating. And the transcripts will tell you a lot. Like, you'll see how it developed. But yeah, it was an amazing day.
Yeah.
Perfect. All righty. I'm going to end it here. I hope everybody has a good night. Like I said, we'll probably do this tomorrow, and who knows, maybe next week too. So I'm going to end it here. And I will see you guys later.
For sure. Thanks, Ryan. Salute.
Yep. See you guys.
See you, man.